Hey guys, tonight we begin with the unsettling charm of Victorian street sleep, where you wander past gaslit alleys and stumble into a world that offers you three choices for rest, each one stranger than the last. Your breath ghosts in the cold night air as you listen to a man explain, with complete seriousness, that hanging from a rope for 2 pennies is honestly not that bad once your arms go numb. Everything around you feels like a mixture of hardship, ingenuity, and the sort of humor that only appears when life has stopped being polite. So before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And be sure to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now, get comfortable. Let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You step into the London night as if it exhales around you, a long, cool breath filled with coal smoke, river damp, and the faint sweetness of roasted chestnuts, sold by someone who looks far more hopeful than the city deserves. The cobblestones gleam beneath the gas lamps, not because they are clean, but because the earlier rain has polished every uneven stone into a glistening trap for your boots. Your coat is thin, your pockets are thinner, and the city seems to sense it. London always knows when you are an easy mark for both misfortune and mildly overpriced street snacks. You walk with the confidence of someone who does not yet understand what the night has planned for you. You expect perhaps a quiet stroll, maybe a bench, maybe a corner, where you can lean against a wall without attracting too many suspicious glances. What you find instead is a different London, the night version, the one that does not bother hiding its struggles behind bright shop windows and polite daytime manners. A man with a beard that could comfortably house at least 2 small birds drifts past you, muttering about the price of onions. Another person sits beneath a soot-stained archway as if they are part of the architecture. You cannot tell if they are asleep or simply tired of participating in consciousness. As you continue, you notice a line forming outside a narrow doorway. There is no sign, no warm glow from inside, just a dim lantern hanging overhead as if even it is not entirely sure whether it wants to be associated with the place. The people in line look like they know each other, not by name but by circumstance. Their shoulders share the same tired slope, their coats the same threadbare patches. You hover nearby, watching the shuffle of boots, the exchange of quiet whispers, the occasional cough that sounds like it has ambitions of becoming a musical instrument. A woman with sharp eyes and a softer voice leans toward you and explains, in the same tone one might use to describe a very disappointing dessert, that this is where you go if you need a roof, but lack funds for anything involving a bed. She calls it rough sleeping. You feel the term settle over you like another layer of fog. Rough is a generous word. It suggests a kind of textured inconvenience rather than what it truly is, which is survival by improvisation. Curiosity pushes you forward. Inside, the air feels warmer but also thicker, crowded with the smell of damp wool, unwashed socks, and whatever stew someone spilled earlier that evening. A man behind a counter announces that the penny sit-ups are full for the moment, though he says it with the weary confidence of someone who knows the crowd will not complain. They do not have the energy. You do not entirely understand what a penny sit-up is, but from the people sitting upright along the wall, heads bobbing with exhaustion, you gather it is exactly what the name promises. You watch a man drift in and immediately take a seat, folding himself into the rigid posture of someone who has surrendered to the reality that comfort is more rumor than possibility. You try to picture yourself in his place, arms crossed, chin tucked to your chest, sleeping upright through the night, like a pigeon with existential concerns. It does not look pleasant, but it looks like a choice that people make when the alternative is the open street, where the cold waits to collect the unwary. One of the penny sleepers cracks an eye open and gives you a faint nod, as if welcoming you into a club no one wants to join. His voice is rough but friendly as he tells you that nights here are never the same. Some are loud, some are quiet. Some come with dramatic reenactments of past arguments no one remembers starting. There is humor in his tone, the kind that only develops when life has become absurd enough. That laughter feels like the strongest tool left. You step back outside for a moment, letting the cooler air wash over you. The city stretches in every direction, full of alleys where people curl beneath blankets made of yesterday's newspaper and corners where families huddle together for warmth. The truth settles into you with slow certainty. This is not just a bad night. This is the nightly routine for many. A strange mix of endurance and resignation shaped by the clink of a single coin. You stand there, feeling the weight of the night press gently against your shoulders. Not unkind, but unmistakably real. And you understand that your first encounter with rough sleeping is not something you will forget. It is not dramatic, not sensational, just quietly human, woven from exhaustion, necessity, and the stubborn hope that tomorrow might offer something warmer than a penny and a place to sit. You learn quickly that London at night is a different creature, one with narrow eyes and a numbity, the habit of rearranging itself when you are not looking. The alleys twist in ways that feel intentional, as if the city wants to test whether you can keep up. You step into one such passage and immediately feel the walls close in with damp brick and the faint scent of boiled cabbage that seems to follow you no matter where you turn. A cat slips past your feet like a furry accusation, and you almost apologize just to keep the peace. Every scrap of space feels claimed, not by people, but by the lingering mood of centuries spent collecting grime and secrets. A man from the shelter gives you your first lesson, not with instructions, but with a look that says you are about to embarrass yourself if you keep walking like that. You realize he means your pace, your posture, the way you turn your head at every sound like a tourist admiring local architecture. He sidles up beside you and mutters that if you want to make it through the night unbothered, you keep your eyes forward, your hands visible, and your footsteps steady. The alleys reward confidence in the same way stray dogs reward calm. They do not necessarily fear you, but they might let you pass. You take his advice, adopting a purposeful stride as you weave through cramped spaces lit by gas lamps that hiss softly overhead. The lamps flicker with an untrustworthy glow, their halos of light trembling with every breeze, and you learn to rely on them only partially. People say the lamps make the streets safer, but they also cast long shadows that look suspiciously like crouching figures until you get close enough to see they are only stacks of crates or barrels that have lost the will to remain upright. You start to understand why some Londoners refuse to walk under a lamp directly. It feels a little like someone shining a spotlight on you and waiting to see what you will do next. As you practice your new walk, you notice the constables. They appear out of mist and darkness like they have been summoned by the mere thought of mischief. Their boots strike the stones with a rhythm that seems designed to remind everyone else that they possess both authority and shoes significantly nicer than yours. You learn to read them the same way you read the weather. If a constable strolls casually with hands clasped behind his back, the night is mild and uneventful. If he moves briskly with his cloak swirling behind him like a disappointed schoolmaster, it means someone nearby is about to have a very inconvenient evening. One approaches you, his silhouette framed by lamplight, and you feel every instinct tell you to rearrange your facial expression into something honest. He looks you over with the weary patience of someone who has seen far too many people who do not belong where they are standing. You hold your ground, neither too still nor too fidgety, and he eventually nods in a way that suggests you have passed a test without fully understanding the criteria. When he moves on, you let out a breath you were not aware you had been holding. A woman you met earlier teaches you the next rule by demonstration rather than explanation. She navigates the alleys with a fluid grace, stepping around puddles you had not noticed and avoiding doorways that look perfectly harmless until you see the glint of eyes peering out from within. She snaps her fingers for you to follow and tells you to never assume an alley is empty just because it looks quiet. London is a great collector of people who prefer not to be found, and most of them have strong opinions about being stepped on. The unspoken rules accumulate. You learn to listen for the soft scrape of boots behind you and to shift to one side so the person can pass without feeling challenged. You learn to keep to the right side of the path when possible, a practice that seems to have no reason, but every Londoner obeys instinctively. You learn that some corners are social spaces where the unhoused gather to exchange gossip, scraps of food, and heated debates about which bakery throws out the best bread. These corners are safe to pass if you offer a polite nod. Any attempt at conversation is risky unless invited. You also learn the art of pretending not to notice things that would concern you during the day. A man arguing emphatically with a lamppost is none of your business. A woman balancing 3 baskets of laundry on her head while humming a tune that sounds older than the city probably does not want help. A constable checking on a group of sleepers with the stoic calm of a man cataloging livestock is best left undisturbed. By the time the night grows older, you move differently. You step with intention, glance only when necessary, and weave through the labyrinth of alleys with just enough confidence to avoid looking entirely out of place. The city has not welcomed you exactly, but it has stopped treating you like an intruder. You have learned its rhythm, its warnings, and the quiet dance required to pass through it without drawing too much attention. And for the first time, the night feels like something you might survive. You hear about the penny sit-ups long before you see them, whispered in the same tone people use for particularly unpleasant medical remedies. At first, you assume the name is a joke, something exaggerated for effect, like calling a cramped room a palace or dubbing a persistent rat a loyal roommate. But as you step back into the shelter, the truth presents itself with far less humor than the name suggests. A row of benches lines the dim wall, each occupied by someone attempting to sleep in the sort of posture normally reserved for disappointed school children. Their heads droop forward, their backs slump, and their knees jut out like reluctant participants in a strange ritual. The man you met earlier sits among them, offering you a faint grin that communicates both camaraderie and mild warning. He taps the space beside him, inviting you to join, and you lower yourself onto the worn wood with the hesitation of someone unsure whether they are about to rest or perform a physical challenge. The bench creaks under your weight, complaining softly as if it had hoped for a lighter burden. You try to settle in, crossing your arms the way everyone else does. But your shoulders tense immediately, and your neck seems to sense betrayal. A woman sitting 2 places down watches your attempts with an expression of gentle amusement. She explains that no one chooses the penny sit-ups because they want to. They choose them because the alternative is the street, where the cold seeps into your bones like it has a personal grudge. Sitting upright inside is marginally warmer and comes with the benefit of being less likely to wake up damp or missing a shoe. She tilts her head in the direction of a man who bears precisely 1 shoe and shrugs as if to say, "There is your proof." As the minutes pass, you begin to understand the strange rhythm of this arrangement. Every person finds a way to brace themselves against gravity, which is determined to remind them that sleep should involve lying down. Some tuck their chins to their chests and doze for a few seconds at a time before snapping awake. Others lean slightly against the wall, though the wall looks just as exhausted as the people using it. One man has perfected a technique that involves holding his own coat lapels as if they are reins on an unruly horse. You admire his creativity, while also realizing it is the sort of creativity born from a lack of options. You try closing your eyes. For a moment, it almost works. You drift in that hazy space between waking and sleep, where sounds blend together and the hard bench beneath you becomes something your mind politely ignores. Then your head slips forward, and you jolt upright with a small snort that earns you a sympathetic pat on the shoulder from the man beside you. He assures you that everyone goes through this stage, the awkward learning curve where your body struggles to accept the situation, Eventually, you will find a sweet spot where your spine surrenders and your eyelids win the battle. The air in the room feels heavy but warm, carrying the scent of damp wool and tired breath. People settle into a quiet resignation, the kind that does not ask for comfort, only endurance. You notice a few soft murmurs, not conversations exactly, but shared observations about the night's weather or hopes that tomorrow brings better luck. There is a sense of community, fragile but real, stitched together by necessity rather than choice. No one here is proud of the situation, yet no one mocks it either. Humor surfaces occasionally, usually in the form of someone muttering about how their spine will file a complaint with a higher authority the moment morning arrives. You lean back as far as the bench allows and feel your body adjust in small increments. The discomfort does not vanish, but it becomes familiar, a companion you tolerate because it is preferable to the cold waiting outside. You are not sure when it happens exactly, but at some point, your breath steadies, your limbs loosen, and sleep hovers close enough that you can almost touch it. This is the penny sit-up, the cheapest sleep money can buy. And sitting among strangers who are all trying to rest in the same absurd posture, you understand why people choose it. Not because it is easy, or pleasant, or remotely sensible, but because sometimes survival means settling for whatever the night makes available. You walk into the shelter expecting something at least vaguely familiar, maybe rows of cots or straw pallets or any arrangement that suggests a relationship with horizontal living. Instead, the place is shaped like a compromise between a hallway, a barn, and someone's ill-conceived idea of efficiency. Every inch of space is used, yet everything feels cramped in a way that defies geometry. You have the sense that the building was not designed so much as negotiated into existence, the result of too many opinions and not enough money. The walls lean in slightly, as if the whole structure is listening to the occupants and judging their life choices. A narrow passage leads you to the main room. It is long and dim, the ceiling low enough to make taller men hunch instinctively, as if the building might scold them for growing too much. The floorboards creak with tired familiarity, carrying the weight of countless nights and countless bodies that sat, slept, snored, and occasionally toppled sideways. The benches are arranged in straight lines, but they do not look intentional. They look as though someone pushed them into place while muttering about space and budgets and the sad state of the modern world. You take a moment to study the layout, trying to understand the logic behind it. The benches are spaced just far enough apart to prevent conflict, but close enough that you can feel the warmth of the person sitting near you. That warmth is important. It may be the only mercy the building offers. Above you, a single iron beam runs the length of the room, holding the ceiling in place with a sense of tired duty. You imagine it groaning every night around 3 a.m. when everyone finally stops shifting in their seats. A man who has clearly spent many nights here gestures toward a corner where the walls meet at a strange angle. He tells you that the building was once a storage shed, then a carpenter's workshop, then something involving poultry that no one likes to discuss. Each transformation left behind traces, odd doorways that lead to nothing, windows positioned at heights that do not align with human proportions, and a slanted roof that drips only in specific spots, no matter how the weather behaves. The architecture is less a design and more an archaeological dig with a roof. You notice that the benches themselves are mismatched. Some are plain, others carved with decorative swirls that look wildly out of place, and one has initials etched so deeply that you suspect the carver spent an entire night perfecting them out of sheer boredom. The unevenness of the wood becomes obvious when you sit down. One seat tilts forward, encouraging you to slide off like an unwelcome guest, while another tilts back, just enough to give your neck ideas about staging a protest. No one complains. Complaining takes energy, and energy is a fragile commodity here. The air inside is stagnant, but not unbearable, holding the warmth of bodies and the lingering scent of damp coats. Oil lamps spaced along the walls flicker with an uncertain glow. Their light creates pockets of brightness surrounded by deep folds of shadow, as if the room cannot decide whether it wants to be cozy or ominous. The shadows shift every time someone moves, stretching across the benches like curious pets. You find yourself glancing at them the way you might check on a mischievous toddler. A group gathers near a corner, where the bench meets a crooked pillar. They huddle there not because the space is comfortable, but because it offers a small sense of privacy. The pillar blocks the sight of the door, and the angle of the wall muffles the noise of the street. You realize that within this peculiar architecture, micro-territories exist. People have favorite spots, not because they are good, but because they are less bad. One man nods toward a bench directly under a roof leak and whispers that only the truly desperate choose it. As you sit among them, you feel the building around you, not welcoming exactly, but accommodating in its own flawed way. It provides shelter from the cold and a place to rest, even if rest comes in the form of stiff spines and awkward slouching. The architecture forces you into closeness with others, creating a quiet sense of shared endurance. You begin to understand that the shape of the room, the tilt of the benches, and the creaking floorboards all become part of the nightly ritual. You lean back slightly, adjusting to the discomfort, and the walls seem to settle with you. This odd, slanted, leaning structure holds everyone the same way, not gently, but steadily. It is not a home, not even truly a refuge, but it is a place where the night passes without freezing you into stillness. And sometimes that is enough. You learn early that staying balanced through exhaustion is not something you master alone. The shelter seems determined to throw you off the bench at every opportunity, leaning at angles that feel personally targeted. But the people around you turn the struggle into something almost communal. You take your place among them, shoulders touching or nearly touching, and realize that everyone here has developed a unique strategy for remaining upright without drifting sideways into a stranger's lap. It is a strange kind of choreography, subtle and unspoken, practiced by necessity rather than choice. The first person to offer you advice is an older man with a beard that looks like it has survived several eras of fashion without participating in any of them. He tilts his head toward you with the deliberate slowness of someone who refuses to waste energy. He explains that the trick is to let your spine soften but not collapse, and to place your feet just so, wide enough for stability but close enough that no one mistakes your posture for aggression. He demonstrates by adjusting his position in tiny increments until he settles into a state that resembles peace, if peace ever learned to slouch. You copy him awkwardly, wobbling once, and he pats your knee like a patient instructor who has seen far worse attempts. Beside him sits a woman wrapped in a shawl woven from mismatched scraps of fabric, each piece a different pattern stitched together with stubborn optimism. She watches you through tired but bright eyes, then shows you how she loops her arms through the straps of her satchel to keep herself from pitching forward when sleep hits too quickly. She laughs softly when your first attempt nearly strangles you, and she adjusts the strap so it rests safely across your chest. Her laughter is not unkind. It sounds like someone who has long accepted that survival often requires improvisation bordering on absurdity. On your other side, a young man with a mop of hair that looks permanently windblown leans back until his shoulders press lightly against the wall. He explains that the wall is both friend and foe, supportive but unpredictable, like a relative who remembers your birthday only half the time. He has learned to brace against it in a way that absorbs its occasional shudder without sending him sprawling. You ask how he discovered this method, and he replies that an especially dramatic collapse 3 nights ago provided valuable insight. He shares this information with cheerful pride, as if falling off a bench were a rite of passage worth celebrating. Further down the row sits a woman who appears to have perfected the art. She maintains her balance with the serene stillness of a monk meditating on a mountain peak. Her eyes stay half closed, her breathing even, and her posture effortlessly upright. The others refer to her with a mix of admiration and suspicion, convinced she possesses secret knowledge unavailable to regular mortals. When you gather the courage to ask how she does it, she opens one eye and says she imagines herself as a tree, not a magnificent tree or a well-behaved tree, but a stubborn one rooted in the worst possible soil, refusing to fall simply out of spite. The idea appeals to you more than you expect. As the night deepens, you begin to see how everyone here supports one another without drawing attention to it. When someone starts to tip forward in sleep, a nearby hand steadies them with gentle pressure, then slips away before the gesture becomes a burden. When a man slumps sideways, the person beside him nudges him upright with the practiced ease of someone rearranging furniture. No one speaks about these small acts of care. They happen naturally, like breathing or shivering, or the soft murmurs people make when dreaming upright. You learn that exhaustion erodes many things, but not humor. A man across from you recounts his first night of penny sleeping, describing with dramatic flair how he slid off the bench twice, head first, like laundry falling from a poorly hung line. The group chuckles, the sound rolling through the room in waves of shared understanding. Another woman chimes in to claim she once slept so deeply she woke with her face pressed against the knee of a stranger who looked equally confused. He had apparently considered waking her, but decided the situation felt too delicate to handle before sunrise. As you settle into your own awkward posture, surrounded by people who have mastered this strange art in their own way, you feel something shift inside you. The discomfort remains, of course, but now you are part of a collective balancing act, a quiet gathering of individuals leaning together against the night. Each person holds themselves upright through willpower, experience, and the occasional assist from someone sitting inches away. And though the room is filled with exhaustion, there is also resilience, stitched together by shared effort and the simple understanding that none of you face the night alone. You discover quickly that sharing a room filled with strangers who cannot recline produces a very specific blend of comedy and suffering, as if the universe decided to run an experiment on human endurance and forgot to inform the participants. The benches stretch in crooked rows, each one carrying people who drift in and out of upright sleep with varying degrees of dignity. You take your place among them and feel the bench accept you with its usual combination of indifference and mild hostility. The air is warm with body heat, thick with damp wool, and the faint tang of coal smoke carried in on coats that have not fully dried. The first sound you notice is the snoring. You expect gentle snoring, sleepy snoring, maybe the occasional tiny whistle, but the room produces sounds that defy categorization. A man 3 seats down emits a rumble so deep it vibrates through the wood, like a small earthquake with poor manners. Another man across from you lets out high-pitched squeaks at irregular intervals, creating the uneasy impression that he is secretly practicing to become a kettle. The woman beside him snores with a rising and falling rhythm that reminds you of someone sawing through particularly stubborn furniture. Together, the noises merge into something that could almost be music, if music ever suffered a terrible disappointment. When someone's head slips forward, they jerk awake with a snort loud enough to startle the people in the next row. The chain reaction is immediate. One person jumps, another mutters something half-coherent, and a third insists loudly that he was awake the entire time. Then everything settles back into its usual rhythm, as if the interruption were just another part of the nightly performance. You learn that the room does not truly sleep. It simply cycles through phases of semi-consciousness marked by snoring solos and startled awakenings. There is also the matter of breathing. A surprising number of people breathe through their mouths in a way that sounds like they are attempting to slurp soup from a great distance. One man takes in air with such determination that you begin to worry he might inhale something he did not intend to. A woman several benches away wheezes softly with each inhale, creating a rhythmic pattern that becomes strangely comforting after a while, like a lullaby played by someone who has never encountered a musical instrument. Despite the chaos, humor finds its way into the room. A man near the door wakes from a micro-nap and, in the fog of confusion, begins apologizing to the bench for falling asleep on it. When someone quietly points out that it is a bench and incapable of offense, he nods gravely, agreeing to treat it better in the future. Another man, awakened by his own snore, looks around accusingly as if searching for the culprit. His confusion lasts a full minute before he sighs with deep betrayal and settles back into his seat. The misery reveals itself more slowly. You feel it in the stiffness creeping across your shoulders, in the way your back strains to remain upright, in the ache behind your eyes that grows heavier with each half-second of sleep lost to someone else's snort. The benches do not soften. They do not adjust. They remain exactly as they are, as if the building itself has decided that rest should be earned through discomfort. You shift your weight, adjust your posture, attempt to imitate the seasoned sleepers around you. But every small improvement brings a new pressure point or awkward angle. Yet something about the shared experience keeps the room from feeling hopeless. People nudge each other gently when someone lists too, far to one side, catching them before they fall. A woman lends you a folded scarf for extra padding beneath your spine, insisting you will not last the night without it. Another person, half asleep, murmurs encouragement as if you are climbing a mountain instead of sitting on an unforgiving plank of wood. As the hours pass, the symphony of snores becomes background noise, an odd kind of soundtrack for a night that refuses to be comfortable. You find moments of humor tucked between the exhaustion, brief sparks of connection with strangers who share nothing with you except the desire to make it to morning without collapsing. The misery remains, but it blends with something else, something steadier, shaped by the quiet understanding that everyone here is trying their best with what little the night offers. By the time you drift into your own fragile sleep, surrounded by people who snore like malfunctioning machinery, you realize the room has transformed. It is not cozy or peaceful, but it is human in a way few places are. And in the strange harmony of shared discomfort, you find a sliver of comfort of your own. You learn about the 2-penny hangover from a man who describes it the way someone might describe a very questionable meal. He warns you with raised eyebrows and a tone that suggests you should prepare both physically and spiritually. You think he is exaggerating, but then again, you thought the penny sit-ups were exaggerated too, and look how that turned out. So when you hand over 2 pennies and step into the rope room, you brace yourself for anything except what you actually see. At first, you do not understand what you are looking at. The room is dim, lit by a few oil lamps that flicker as if embarrassed to witness what is happening. There are no benches, no beds, not even crates. Instead, a thick rope stretches across the space from one wall to the other, sagging slightly in the middle under the weight of human bodies draped over it. People lean forward, onto the rope, their arms hanging loosely, their heads bowed, their entire weight surrendered to a strip of coarse hemp like exhausted pilgrims at a shrine dedicated to poor life choices. The sight hits you with such absurdity that you stand frozen for a moment, unsure whether to laugh or reconsider your entire night. You find an empty section of rope and approach it with hesitation, because nothing about it looks like a reasonable sleeping arrangement. It feels like something invented by a committee of people who have never slept but have plenty of opinions about how others should. You grip the rope and feel the rough fibers scrape your palms. It smells faintly of sweat, desperation, and the rope's own quiet plea to retire permanently. The man beside you gestures for you to lean forward, placing your weight on the rope as if it were the most natural thing in the world. You follow his example, bending over until your chest meets the coarse surface and your arms dangle like wilted branches. The first sensation you feel is relief, or something close to it. After nights of sitting upright, even this strange posture gives your spine a break. The second sensation is discomfort as the rope begins to make its opinion known. It presses into your ribs, reminding you that comfort is a temporary illusion in this place, but fatigue is stronger. Your breathing finds a rhythm, and your eyelids begin to droop despite the ridiculous position. Then you hear it. The soft chorus of people breathing, snoring, sighing, and shifting against the rope creates a sound unlike anything you have ever experienced. It is as though a flock of very tired geese decided to nap in unison. One man snores into the rope with such force that the vibration travels along the fibers and reaches you like an unsolicited message. A woman 2 spaces down periodically lifts her head in her sleep, then drops it again with a soft thud that no one reacts to. Someone mutters dream fragments, the kind that make sense only to the dreamer and possibly their long-lost accountant. When you close your eyes, the strangeness begins to fade, and exhaustion pulls you into a hazy state. You do not fall asleep exactly. You slide into it, suspended between wakefulness and dreams, in the same way your body is suspended between gravity and the rope. Time becomes slippery. Your thoughts wander. At some point, your legs tremble from the strain of partial standing, but you barely notice. The rope holds you, not comfortably, but consistently, which is the closest thing to kindness you have received all evening. Morning, however, arrives like a rude awakening in physical form. You open your eyes, and every muscle feels like it has been individually insulted. Your shoulders ache, your back protests, and your ribs throb where the rope pressed through the night. This is the 2-penny hangover, the kind earned not from drink but from gravity's slow revenge. Around you, other sleepers stretch and groan, shaking off the stiffness with the resigned acceptance of people who know this will not be the last time. As you straighten up, the rope leaves a faint line across your chest, a mark of the night's strange bargain. You look around at the others, each bearing the same weary expression, and realize you have joined a peculiar fraternity of suspended sleepers. It is absurd, uncomfortable, and undeniably human, and as strange as the night was, part of you understands why people come back. In a world that offers so little rest, even a rope can feel like salvation. The rope becomes a character in your night long before it becomes a place to sleep. You see it stretched across the room like a tired sentinel, sagging under the weight of too many bodies and too many nights. It hangs in a slow curve, neither taut nor slack, just giving off the quiet attitude of an object that knows exactly how unreasonable it is and refuses to apologize. When you touch it, the texture surprises you. It is rough, scratchy, and stubborn, made of thick hemp fibers twisted so tightly they might hold a ship in place. Yet here they are, offering themselves as a budget-friendly pillow substitute. You run your fingers along the rope and feel its age. It is frayed in some places and smoother in others, worn down by countless hands and chests and foreheads. You imagine it keeping a tally of every person who has leaned on it, every moment of exhaustion it has supported, every tiny complaint whispered into its coarse strands. It responds to your inspection with mild disinterest, swaying a little as if to say that you will use it whether it likes you or not. When you lean onto it again, you notice how the sag changes depending on who else is using it. A particularly large man settles 3 spots down from you, and the rope dips dramatically, dragging your posture into a new and unexpected angle. You adjust your stance, shifting your feet until you achieve a position that feels less like you are falling forward and more like you are making a polite attempt at rest. A woman on your other side braces against the opposite wall, giving the rope a slight upward lift that nudges you towards something resembling equilibrium. The rope does not belong to any single person. It is a shared experience, a communal negotiation with physics. Comfort, as you learn quickly, is not the goal. You are not here for comfort. You are here for something that vaguely resembles sleep. You sink your weight into the rope until your arms drape over it naturally, and your chest settles against the coarse surface. The pressure is firm, insistent, not exactly pleasant, but reliable in a way that surprises you. Every time you exhale, the rope pushes back slightly, reminding you that this bargain involves as much compromise from you as it does from the rope itself. Gravity becomes your unpredictable partner. It tugs at your limbs, pulling you downward, one sleepy inch at a time. You feel it in your shoulders first, then your spine, then your legs as they work to maintain the half-standing, half-collapsing posture the rope demands. You try leaning more of your weight forward, hoping the rope will take on a bit more responsibility, but it responds by sagging further, threatening to fold you into an accidental somersault. You retreat, reassess, and find a new angle, learning the subtle balance between surrendering and supporting yourself. Around you, the others have made peace with the arrangement in their own ways. A man rests his cheek directly on the rope, imprinting the weave of the fibers into his skin. Another hooks his elbows over it with practiced ease, letting gravity do most of the work while he drifts in and out of consciousness. A woman hums softly as she adjusts her weight, rocking gently as though coaxing the rope into cooperation. Everyone has a method, even if none of the methods make logical sense. The longer you remain in place, the more the rope becomes familiar. Not comfortable, never that, but familiar. In the same way, a long walk or a worn pair of boots becomes familiar. Your breath slows, your muscles adapt, your grip on the rope loosens. It creaks beneath the shifting weight of the room, speaking in small groans that feel strangely reassuring. You realize that the rope is not there to cradle you. It is there to challenge you just enough that sleep becomes possible through sheer determination. By the time your eyes drift closed, you have found a rhythm. Not perfect, not even stable, but workable. You trust the rope to hold just enough of you that the night can pass without catastrophe. And in this strange negotiation with gravity, you discover something almost like rest. You discover that conversations among hanging sleepers have their own peculiar rhythm, drifting in and out of coherence like dream fragments shared aloud. Everyone is half standing, half collapsing, and entirely too tired to pretend at formality. The rope room becomes a place where exhaustion loosens, tongues just enough for honesty and foolishness to mingle without shame. You lean forward against the rope, letting it press into your ribs as the people around you begin the nightly tradition of talking, simply because remaining silent would make the hours feel even longer. A man to your left begins the first thread of conversation by announcing, with great seriousness, that he has figured out the exact moment the rope begins judging him. He claims it happens when his knees wobble for the third time. Everyone nearby hums in agreement, as though this is a widely accepted scientific truth. You cannot help but laugh, which only encourages him. He explains that he once tried to lean his full weight onto the rope as if it were a trusted friend, only for it to sag dramatically and nearly launch him forward. The group reacts with soft chuckles, the kind that come from shared suffering rather than mockery. Moments later, the man admits he still trusts the rope more than he trusts Monday mornings. On your other side, a woman with wild curls and eyes that flicker with amusement begins describing the dream she had the night before. A dream where the rope transformed into a stern governess who scolded everyone for slouching. The idea spreads through the room like a warm draft, and a few people begin adding details, turning her dream into a full story. Someone claims the dream governess carries a bell. Another insists she has perfect posture and smells faintly of citrus. Before long, the rope is no longer a rope, but a character with a personality, which makes the whole experience feel slightly more tolerable. Further down the line, two men argue quietly about which type of footwear is most suitable for this unusual form of sleep. One swears by thick boots because they anchor the body, while the other insists that boots make you lean forward too aggressively and that soft shoes are the superior choice. They invite you to weigh in, and you glance at your own worn shoes, realizing you have never thought about them so philosophically. You give an answer based on pure guesswork, and both men nod as though you have offered important insight. The conversation shifts to whether socks count as shoes if worn with enough determination. The room fills with muttered exchanges, jokes formed through fatigue, and small observations about the rope's mood, the weather outside, or whose stomach just growled loudly enough to be mistaken for distant thunder. One man begins humming under his breath, a simple tune with no beginning or end, and others join in with off-key murmurs. The harmony is questionable, but the spirit behind it is genuine. It makes the room feel less like a place of hardship and more like a strange gathering brought together by necessity and a surprising willingness to laugh. A woman leans her cheek on the rope and asks the group what they would each be doing if they were not here tonight. Answers emerge hesitantly at first, then more freely. One says he would be asleep on a warm hearthstone somewhere, though he has no idea whose hearthstone it would be. Another claims he would be reading a book if he could remember the last time he held one that was not missing half its pages. A third says he would be eating a meat pie, but since meat pies have become mythological creatures in his life, he would settle for watching someone else eat one. Their honesty is soft, almost fragile, and no one makes light of it. Yet even in the quiet moments, humor reappears. A man who has been silent the entire night finally lifts his head and proclaims with the confidence of a philosopher that everyone should stop complaining because the rope, in its own way, is a better conversationalist than most of his relatives. The room erupts in tired laughter, the kind that comes from deep in the chest and lingers just long enough to warm the air. In these suspended conversations, boredom twists into comedy, and misery softens into camaraderie. You hang there with the others, held up by nothing more than rope and weary stubbornness. And you realize that the night is easier when voices weave through it. Somehow, the simple act of talking, of sharing the absurdity of the situation, makes the hours feel lighter. And in that dim room of half-dreaming people, you find yourself grateful for every ridiculous word. The hours before dawn stretch in a way that feels personal, as if time itself has decided to test your patience. The rope supports your weight in a manner that can only be described as reluctant. The chill in the room deepens, slipping through coats and scarves until it settles against your skin like a persistent whisper. You shift your stance in small increments, trying to convince your body that this half-leaning, half-hanging posture is perfectly reasonable. It is not, of course, but your body does not argue as loudly as it did earlier in the night. Fatigue has a way of softening objections. Your knees begin to ache first, sending polite reminders that they were not designed to hold you in this strange configuration. Over time, the reminders become less polite, but you discover tiny adjustments that help, shifting one foot slightly behind the other or relaxing your hips until your balance stabilizes again. The rope presses into your ribs with a steady insistence, and your chest rises and falls against the coarse fibers. The friction is uncomfortable, yet the warmth created by it becomes strangely welcome. It is an odd sort of comfort, like hugging a very scratchy friend. The cold air settles in pockets around the room. You can feel it near your ankles especially, a creeping numbness that threatens to climb upward. People around you stomp their feet quietly from time to time, trying not to disturb the fragile sleep that hovers over the group. You follow their example, shifting your legs and rolling your shoulders, creating just enough movement to keep the cold from taking full control. It becomes a kind of shared dance, performed without coordination, each person fighting the same steady invasion of frost. Despite everything, a strange calm settles over you. The dim oil lamps create soft halos of light on the walls, and the low murmur of breathing becomes a backdrop that your mind slowly accepts. Every sound blends together into a muted lullaby of snores, sighs, gentle rope creaks, and the occasional whispered curse when someone's knee buckles unexpectedly. You find yourself drifting in and out of shallow sleep, the kind where dreams form and dissolve before you can grasp them. In these moments, your body relaxes just a little more, trusting the rope to hold what you cannot. Eventually, you notice your muscles behaving differently. The tension in your back eases into a reluctant truce. Your arms hang more naturally. Even your legs settle into a rhythm, swaying slightly with each breath. It is not true rest, but your body adapts in small, surprising ways, choosing survival over comfort. You feel the change most clearly in your spine, which stops bracing against the posture and begins to follow the curve of the rope instead. A strange sense of equilibrium emerges. You are balanced, not comfortably, but sustainably, and that is enough for the moment. Outside, the city sleeps under a blanket of fog. You can feel the cold pressing against the walls, trying to seep in. The rope room holds firm, though, filled with shared warmth and shared stubbornness. People shift and settle, leaning into their exhaustion with quiet determination. You join them, letting the night move through you rather than resisting it. Time becomes slippery again, and you lose track of how many minutes or hours have passed. Then a faint hint of light begins to creep into the world. It does not enter the room directly, but you feel it in the change of air, in the soft stirring of the sleepers, in the way the rope itself seems to brace for release. The worst of the night has passed. Your body, aching and stiff, has survived the posture that once felt impossible. And as you wait for dawn to fully take hold, you realize that adaptation is not a choice here. It is what keeps you upright until morning. You hear about the four-penny coffin the same way you hear about most things in this world, through a whispered rumor from someone who looks far too tired to be exaggerating. The name alone gives you pause. It sounds dramatic, ominous, and just a little theatrical, as if you are purchasing a ticket to your own funeral. But after nights of sitting upright or folding yourself over a rope like laundry hung out to dry, 4 pennies suddenly feel like an investment in your own survival. You hand over the coins, and the attendant nods with the weary approval of someone who has seen this decision save many a stubborn back. The room is quieter than the penny and 2-penny spaces, and that is the first sign that you are stepping into a different tier of the nighttime economy. The air feels less crowded, though it still carries the familiar sense of damp wool and bodies that have not known proper beds in far too long. Rows of wooden boxes line the area, each one shaped unmistakably like a coffin. The sight makes you pause, your breath catching for a moment. The boxes are simple, unadorned, built with rough planks that look borrowed from a shed that ran out of ambition halfway through construction. Yet something about them feels strangely inviting. You approach an empty one and run your hand along the edge. The wood is coarse beneath your fingers, splintery in places, smoother in others where countless hands and blankets have worn it down. Each box is just long enough for a person to stretch out if they bend their knees a little, and just wide enough to turn over without knocking elbows. There is a thin blanket folded at the far end, a relic of better times perhaps, patched in multiple places, but soft enough to matter. You slide into the box, easing yourself down until your back meets the wooden surface. It is firm, unforgiving, and far from anything you would have called comfortable in another lifetime. But compared to sitting upright until your spine threatens to file a complaint, or hanging from a rope while gravity plays games with your joints, this feels almost indulgent. You stretch your legs, flex your toes, and marvel at the simple miracle of horizontal living. The ceiling above you is low, close enough that it frames your vision, and for the first time in many nights you can feel your muscles loosen rather than tense. People settle into their boxes with quiet gratitude. It is not the silence of peace exactly, but the silence of people who have finally been granted a small mercy and intend to savor it. Someone to your left sighs with such wholehearted relief that you smile without meaning to. Another person murmurs that they could weep if they had any tears left to spare. Across the room, a woman hums a soft tune, the kind you might sing to a restless child, and the melody drifts over the boxes like a blessing. As you lie there, warmth begins to collect around you. The blanket traps it slowly, encouraging your body to unwind inch by inch. Your breath deepens, your shoulders sink. You close your eyes and feel sleep approach with none of the usual struggle, none of the negotiation with posture or gravity. It comes simply because your body finally understands that it is allowed to rest. The name coffin begins to make sense in its own strange way. The box feels enclosed, personal, a small boundary carved out in a world where space is usually something you borrow rather than own. It is not frightening. It is protective. For a few hours, you have a place that contains only you, a rare pocket of privacy in a life spent navigating crowded rooms and crowded streets. You listen to the soft rustle of blankets, the faint exhale of settling bodies, and the distant rhythm of the city outside. The night feels different from a plying story inside the box. Calmer, kinder. You know the wood is cold, the blanket thin, and the luxury fleeting. But none of that matters as your body sinks deeper, surrendering to rest that no rope or bench has ever offered. And for the first time in far too long, sleep comes without a fight. You do not realize how much you have missed lying flat until the moment your body eases into the wooden box. It creaks beneath you as if offering a cautious welcome, the boards shifting slightly before settling under your weight. The surface is hard, uneven in places, and colder than you would prefer. But compared to the benches and ropes you have survived, it feels like an invitation to remember what rest is supposed to be. You stretch your legs and marvel at the unfamiliar sensation of being fully extended, your joints releasing tiny sighs of gratitude. The blanket waiting for you is thin and patched, its fabric soft in some spots and scratchy in others. You pull it over yourself and feel its weight settle along your body, a small but essential barrier between you and the night's chill. It smells faintly of old soap and older seasons, as if it has seen more winters than any single blanket should. Still, you hold it close, because tonight it is enough. The roughness becomes something familiar within moments, its texture grounding you in the present, even as your mind drifts toward sleep. Inside the wooden box, the world narrows into a space just wide enough for you and your exhaustion. The low walls on either side frame your vision, creating a boundary that feels strangely comforting after so many nights spent guarding your body in crowded, unpredictable rooms. Here, you have a place where elbows will not jab you and strangers will not topple forward onto your shoulder. Privacy becomes a luxury you had forgotten to crave, and as you adjust your position, you realize how deeply you have missed the simple act of claiming your own corner of the night. The wood emits small pops as it warms under your body, settling into a slow rhythm that pairs itself with the rise and fall of your breathing. Each sound feels like a conversation between you and the box, an understanding forming in the darkness. You shift your hips slightly, finding a pocket in the planks where the boards dip inward, creating a shape almost like a cradle. It is not perfect, but your body molds to it, grateful for anything that resembles support. Around you, other sleepers murmur as they settle into their own boxes. A soft cough here, a whispered prayer there, the faint rustle of blankets being adjusted and readjusted. The room fills with the quiet noise of people finally lying down after too many nights spent in positions that felt invented by people who disliked comfort. You listen to these small sounds and feel them wrap around you like reassurance. You are not alone in your relief. Everyone here is savoring the same rare luxury, and the shared gratitude hangs in the air like a gentle warmth. Your shoulders sink deeper into the blanket, and the tightness behind your eyes fades as your muscles understand they no longer need to brace themselves. Even the cold seems less cruel inside the box, softened by the walls that hold your heat close. You tuck your hands beneath the blanket and let your legs relax fully. For the first time in far too long, your spine rests in something close to a natural alignment, and your lungs expand easily in the stillness. The softness of the moment surprises you. You had expected the coffin to feel morbid or unsettling, but instead it feels practical, honest, even a little tender. It holds you without judgment, providing exactly what it promises and nothing more. In a world where survival is often a matter of improvisation, the certainty of this small wooden space feels like a gift. As sleep pulls you under, you realize that joy does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it is as simple as lying flat in a wooden box with a rough blanket and knowing that, for a few precious hours, your body can finally stop fighting. You notice it almost immediately. The way the room moves differently from the penny and two-penny spaces. People speak more softly here, not because of strict rules or harsh attendance, but because the simple ability to lie down makes everyone reluctant to break the spell. You settle into your wooden box and listen as the quiet community of 4 penny sleepers unfolds around you, stitched together not by luxury, but by shared relief. The atmosphere feels warmer, calmer, touched with the kind of gentleness that appears only when people finally have enough space to let their guard slip. Across from you, a man whispers something to the woman in the next box, a small comment about the blessed miracle of horizontal living. She lets out a soft laugh, the kind that comes from someone who has spent far too many nights folded into an impossible posture. Their laughter ripples lightly through the room, not loud enough to disturb anyone, but just enough to remind you that even in this coffin-shaped arrangement, companionship survives. People exchange tiny observations about the day, about the weather, about the state of their boots, or the whereabouts of a friend who did not make enough tonight for the upgrade. There is no boasting here, no competition about who has endured more hardship. Everyone is simply grateful to share a gentler piece of the night. A man a few boxes down begins humming under his breath, a soft, steady tune that settles into the wooden walls like a warm draft. It is not a song you recognize, but its rhythm fits the room, slow and even, meant for calming restless limbs. No one asks him to stop. In fact, a woman near the far wall murmurs encouragement, saying it helps her mind ease out of the day's worries. Soon someone adds a faint harmony, off-key but earnest, and the sound drifts through the boxes with a strange kind of communion. You find your breathing syncing with the melody, your muscles loosening in time with the quiet rise and fall. Conversations grow in pockets, never loud, always measured, like the soft exchanges of travelers resting around a fire. A man with a patched coat shares a story about the first time he tried a coffin and woke convinced he had been buried by mistake. A woman responds with her own memory of falling asleep so quickly that she forgot to eat the bread she had saved for supper. Tiny stories, simple moments, but they create threads between strangers, weaving the boxes together into something more than a row of wooden beds. The privacy of each coffin makes these interactions feel oddly intimate. You are close enough to hear whispered jokes and private hopes, far enough to feel comfortable sinking into your own thoughts. It becomes clear that the upgrade is not only about lying flat, but also about finding a brief and precious softness in a world that rarely offers any. Even the silences carry weight here, shared and understood rather than empty. When someone shifts in their box, the sound is gentle, careful, as though everyone is trying to protect the fragile piece they have purchased with their last few coins. You find yourself speaking too, offering a quiet comment to the person beside you about how strange it feels to have your spine resting against something that does not fight back. They chuckle, agreeing that the 4-penny coffin is not comfort so much as the memory of comfort, but that is enough. The conversation fades naturally, each of you drifting towards sleep, but the connection lingers like a faint glow under the blanket. As the room settles, you realize that this place holds its own form of community, shaped by necessity and bound by the shared appreciation of a small upgrade that feels enormous. Here, people become kinder, softer, almost tender with one another, as if the ability to lie flat makes generosity easier to access. You feel it in the air, in the steady breathing around you, in the way strangers look out for one another with small gestures that would seem impossible in the harsher rooms below. Tonight, you are not simply surviving. You are resting alongside people who understand exactly what it means to earn a few square feet of peace. And in the quiet glow of that understanding, the world feels gentler than it has in a long time. You ease onto your back and stare up at the ceiling, half expecting the wooden walls around you to feel ominous. After all, calling the place a coffin is not exactly the kind of marketing that inspires comfort. Yet as your body settles deeper into the box, the unease slips away in pieces, dissolving under the steady warmth gathering beneath the blanket. You listen to the soft breathing around you, each inhale and exhale weaving into a steady rhythm that fills the room with a strangely protective hush. The shape of the box may resemble something grim, but the feeling it offers is nothing of the sort. Your eyes trace the grain of the wooden plank above you, following its crooked paths like little rivers carved by time. The pattern steadies your mind, giving your thoughts something slow and gentle to wander along. You stretch your legs until your toes press lightly against the far end of the box, savoring the rare chance to lie long and uncurled. Every muscle loosens by degrees, the way a rope unwinds after being pulled too tight for too long. You feel the shift most clearly in your spine, which seems to melt into the wooden slats with weary gratitude. The blanket brushes against your chin as you pull it higher. Its texture is rough, but somehow that roughness feels grounding. It reminds you that the world outside is cold and unpredictable. But here, inside this narrow wooden frame, you have found a border that keeps the night at a respectful distance. The edges of the box cradle you more gently than you expect, the way a small room can feel safer than an open field simply because its walls are close enough to shield you from wandering worry. A soft whisper of movement comes from the next box over, the gentle sound of someone settling into their own slow drift toward sleep. You can hear the faint rustle of their blanket and the quiet hum they make before exhaling. These tiny signs of life wrap around you, steadying the air with a kind of collective calm. There is no sense of threat here, no watchful eyes or wandering elbows, just tired people surrendering to rest in the only place that allows it. Your breathing begins to match the cadence of the room. Inhale, the wood warms a little. Exhale, your shoulders sink deeper. You let your eyelids fall halfway, watching the world blur into soft shapes. The box narrows your field of vision until all you see is the gentle curve of the ceiling, and that narrowing feels less like confinement and more like being tucked into a quiet corner of the night. The strangeness becomes familiar. The familiarity becomes soothing. As your awareness loosens, you begin to drift in that pleasant place between waking and sleep, where thoughts float rather than march, and memories slip in without urgency. You feel the weight of the day lift from your chest, replaced by the warm heaviness of impending rest. Even the faint creak of the wooden boards becomes part of the lullaby, a small reminder that the structure around you is holding firm, keeping you safe while you let go. You close your eyes fully, letting darkness gather. The last thing you notice before sleep catches you is a feeling you barely recognize at first, subtle and quiet. It is not comfort exactly, but something that sits very close to it. A small ember of safety glowing in the middle of an otherwise uncertain world. And in that stillness, the unsettling shape of the coffin fades, leaving only the gentle truth that, for tonight, you are finally allowed to rest. You meet the long-term sleepers slowly, the way you meet most people in this life, through proximity, shared discomfort, and the unspoken rule that those who survive the streets inevitably drift toward each other. They are easy to spot once you know what to look for. Their coats are worn in the particular way fabric wears when it has faced 100 seasons. Their boots have been patched so many times that the patches have their own history. Their eyes carry a kind of steadiness that comes only from living too many nights under open skies and unpredictable roofs. The first one you speak to is a man named Harris, though he admits that is not his real name and that his real name is nobody's business unless they have earned it. He has a voice like gravel and a laugh that sounds like it has not been used in a while. He tells you the secrets of spotting good alleys from bad ones, how a proper alley smells faintly of bread or coal dust, while a dangerous one carries the sour scent of trouble. You listen carefully, because he speaks without flourish, dropping bits of knowledge as casually as crumbs. He explains how to walk, with purpose even when you have nowhere to go, how a confident stride can convince a constable you are meant to be somewhere instead of nowhere. A woman named Liza joins the conversation later, sliding into the coffin beside yours with a tired ease. She has been sleeping rough for more winters than she bothers counting. She tells you how to warm your hands over a brick that has been sitting near a baker's oven, how to hold it under your coat without letting anyone notice. She explains how to read the night air, how certain winds announce frost hours before it forms, and how to choose your shelter accordingly. When she speaks of danger, her voice stays calm, as if fear is a luxury she gave up long ago. Another man, tall and thin as a chimney sweep's brush, sits across from you and shares his thoughts on navigating crowds. He insists that people do not look at faces when they rush through the city. They look at outlines, shapes, movement. If you can match that movement, he says, you can pass through any street unseen. His advice comes with odd metaphors, like comparing foot traffic to migrating birds. But there is a strange poetry in the way he speaks. You begin to realize that surviving outside has made him a kind of philosopher, one who studies people the way others study maps. As the night deepens, more voices join the quiet circle. Someone explains how to split a stale loaf so the harder parts soften faster. Someone else describes how to spot the sympathetic constables, the ones who pretend not to see you if you curl up respectfully and do not make a fuss. A gray-haired man near the corner offers tips for drying wet socks using nothing but body heat and a stubborn attitude. Every piece of wisdom is practical, shaped by lived experience rather than theory. What surprises you most is how freely they share their knowledge. You expected suspicion or guarded silence, the kind that comes from living on the edge of things. Instead, you find generosity woven through their stories, quiet but unmistakable. They do not speak to impress you. They speak because someone once helped them, and this is how the help moves forward. Their voices rise and fall in gentle rhythm, blending with the soft nighttime noises of the shelter. Conversation becomes a kind of warmth, one that spreads without needing a fire. In their presence, you feel your understanding of the streets shift. You begin to see the city not as a cold landscape of alleys and doorways, but as a series of choices, each one shaped by instinct and experience. You see how the people who have lived this life longest carry maps in their minds, maps drawn in footsteps rather than ink. Every tip they give you feels like another point of light in a place that once seemed entirely dark. By the time silence settles back over the room, you realize you have been given something rare. Not rescue, not comfort, but the kind of wisdom that keeps a person alive through nights that refuse to be kind. You hold their words close, knowing that out here, knowledge can be as valuable as a warm coat, and you fall asleep in your narrow box, feeling less alone than you have in a long time. You learn quickly that warmth in the streets is less a matter of clothing and more a matter of strategy. Everyone has a trick, a method, a small miracle they swear by, and they guard these secrets with mock seriousness until you have proven yourself cold enough to deserve them. Once you do, the advice comes freely, each tip offered with the kind of pride usually reserved for magicians revealing their favorite illusion. You find yourself listening closely, because every scrap of wisdom might mean the difference between a miserable night and a tolerable one. The first trick you witness is the art of newspaper layering. Harris demonstrates with careful precision, opening a sheet of yesterday's news and folding it into long, narrow panels. He tucks them beneath his coat, creating an insulated shell that rustles with every movement. He claims the key is to layer the paper so it traps pockets of warm air, turning your torso into a surprisingly effective furnace. You try it yourself, sliding the paper along your chest and back, and feel an immediate difference. The paper crinkles with each breath, making you sound like a walking editorial, but the warmth it provides is undeniable. Liza shows you the scarf technique next, a trick perfected through countless cold nights. She wraps her scarf not just around her neck, but across her shoulders, under her arms, and once around her waist, tying it in a knot that looks far more stylish than she intends. She insists this method creates a central core of heat, locking warmth against your ribs even when the wind tries to snatch it away. When you imitate her, you feel the heat gather beneath the fabric, settling like a small flame that refuses to go out. She nods at your attempt, modestly proud, as though she has just passed down a closely kept family recipe. Another man swears by the double sock trick, though he only owns one pair. He cuts small slits in the top and bottom of the socks, then threads strips of cloth through them, tightening the makeshift layering against his feet. It looks complex, but he assures you that warm feet anchor the rest of the body. You believe him, especially after he explains how cold toes can make you feel chilled everywhere else, even when you are bundled like a winter market goose. A tall woman with a broad smile shows you yet another technique, one she calls the chimney method. She pulls her coat up to form a kind of hood around her shoulders, trapping her breath inside the pocket of fabric. Each exhale creates a warm cushion that slowly spreads down her front. It makes her look like she is permanently shrugging, but the glow of warmth across her face suggests the effectiveness of her invention. You try it and feel the air change almost instantly, a soft cloud of heat forming against your skin. You even learn tricks that sound absurd at first. One man places warm bricks wrapped in cloth inside his coat, using them like portable hearths. Another rubs his hands vigorously until they nearly burn, then presses them against his stomach to warm his core. The most peculiar technique involves stuffing tufts of wool into the lining of your sleeves, not for comfort, but to slow down the cold air that sneaks inside whenever you move. These improvised solutions fill you with admiration for the creativity born out of necessity. As the night deepens and the temperature drops, you find yourself testing combinations: newspaper against your chest, scarf wrapped in a way that would impress Liza, coat positioned just so to trap your breath, and your hands tucked beneath the fabric for extra warmth. You feel like a puzzle that has finally been solved. The cold still reaches you, of course, but it no longer bites as sharply. It becomes something you can negotiate with, rather than endure. All around you, others adjust their layers, share small refinements, and laugh at the absurdity of looking like crumpled bundles of cloth and newsprint. The humor comes easily, warmed by the shared triumph of outsmarting the chill. You feel the camaraderie settle around you like another layer, invisible but warming in its own way. By the time you settle into your chosen sleeping space, the tricks have worked their quiet magic. Your body holds onto its heat. The cold presses in but does not win, and wrapped in fabric, paper, and borrowed wisdom, you drift into sleep feeling surprisingly human beneath the layers. You begin to notice that every night in Victorian London is shaped less by hunger or cold and more by the simple, unromantic truth that sanitation is a distant dream. It lurks beneath everything, a constant presence woven into the streets, alleys, and shelters, the way soot settles into fabric. You cannot escape it. You can only learn to navigate it with the same quiet determination everyone else carries. The smells hit you first, drifting through the air in waves that shift with the wind. Coal smoke, horse manure, spoiled vegetables, and the unmistakable stench of drains that have long since stopped pretending to function. Each scent blends into the next until the entire city feels like one long cautionary tale about the importance of plumbing. When you walk the streets at night, you step around puddles that are definitely not rain. They carry a faint sheen that warns you to choose your next footstep carefully. Some alleys have trickles of liquid running down their centers, little streams fed by chamber pots emptied without ceremony. You learn to keep your boots angled slightly outward, the way the long-term sleepers do, so the worst of it slides off instead of soaking in. It is a small technique, but one that saves you from waking to an odor that lingers no matter how hard you scrub. Inside the shelters, sanitation does not improve so much as reorganize itself into new complications. The penny sit-ups smell of bodies pressed too close together for too many hours. Sweat mixes with wet wool, creating an aroma that settles into your clothes with the persistence of an unwanted memory. The two-penny hangover room has its own scent entirely, one born from rope fibers that have absorbed years of weary sleepers and the faint, sour smell of exhaustion itself. You try not to breathe too deeply, but breathing is difficult to avoid. The four-penny coffin offers more privacy but brings its own surprises. The wooden boxes trap heat, yes, but they also trap everything else. A person's boots at the foot of their box can create a miniature weather system of smells that drift upward in slow spirals. You press your blanket closer to your nose sometimes, choosing the faded scent of old fabric over the alternative. Yet even here, in the most upgraded space you can afford, sanitation remains a negotiation. The attendants clean when they can, sweeping out debris and scrubbing surfaces with soap that has a scent of sharp lye, but the building itself carries the weight of its purpose. The Thames adds its contribution too. Its smell rises through the city at night, a river that has long since surrendered to the tide of industrial waste. You pass bridges where the air grows heavier, tinged with something metallic and sour. People do not linger near the river after dark unless they must. The fog that rolls across the water holds more than mist. It holds the story of everything that has ever been tossed into it. You watch the long-term sleepers navigate all of this with a casual ease that you admire. They step lightly, breathe shallowly at just the right moments, and know exactly which corners to avoid after certain hours. They teach you small tricks without ceremony. Do not stand downwind of the fish market after the sun sets. Do not sleep near the drain pipes unless you enjoy surprises that arrive from above. Do not trust a puddle that does not freeze. In winter, each lesson comes from experience, lived and survived. Despite the discomfort, you adapt. Your nose becomes selective, filtering out what it cannot change. Your steps become careful. Your awareness sharpens. The unglamorous reality of Victorian sanitation transforms from a shock to a backdrop, something that frames each night without defining it completely. You learn where to sit, where to walk, where to sleep, and how to breathe in a world that has not yet discovered the luxury of sewage systems that do their job quietly. And as strange as it sounds, this messy, uneven, unclean city begins to feel like a place you understand, a place where survival is not glamorous, but real, raw, and human. You start to notice the looks long before anyone says a word. They drift toward you in passing glances, quick flicks of the eyes that linger just long enough to sting. At first, you think you are imagining them, that perhaps the fatigue in your bones is playing tricks on your mind. But as the days pass and the nights stretch into familiar routines of rope, bench, or wooden box, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. People judge the tired and unwashed without hesitation, as if weariness itself were a moral failure rather than a simple fact of survival. In daylight, the contrast is sharper. Shopkeepers narrow their eyes when you step too close to their windows, as though your presence alone threatens the structural integrity of their merchandise. Clerks stiffen when you enter establishments that have cleaner floors than shoes. They do not need to speak. Their posture says enough. A mother ushers her child to the far side of the pavement when she sees you approaching, giving you a tight, polite smile meant to disguise the discomfort behind it. The child looks at you with wide curiosity, not yet trained to fear the marks of exhaustion, but the mother's hand tightens around the little wrist, steering them both away. You catch sight of yourself reflected in a bakery window one afternoon. You do not look dangerous. You look tired. Your coat hangs in weary folds. Your hair refuses to obey any attempt at tidiness, and your face carries the unmistakable shadows of too many nights spent in positions that defy anatomy. It occurs to you that you are beginning to blend in with the long-term sleepers, those who move through the city like ghosts that everyone sees, but no one acknowledges unless they must. You feel a strange mixture of pride and sadness at the thought. The stares grow sharper when you nod off while standing, your knees unlocking for a second before you catch yourself. People whisper when you sway slightly on your feet, murmuring about drink or poor decisions, never considering that sleep itself has become a luxury beyond your reach. You learn to straighten your spine whenever someone approaches, to tighten your posture and lift your chin just a little so strangers feel less need to pity or avoid you. You practice looking purposeful even when you have nowhere to go, because purpose, even the imitation of it, seems to soothe the fears of those who see you. Children are the only ones who look at you honestly. They stare with open curiosity, trying to decipher why you look older than your years, or why your clothes carry the creases of long nights and longer walks. One little girl tugs her father's sleeve and whispers something you cannot hear, and the father replies with a tone meant to sound casual but tinted with warning. The child glances back at you with a softness the adults have forgotten how to use. Even among the working poor, judgment appears in subtle ways. Someone shifts a few inches away when you sit beside them on a bench. Another person turns their face just enough to avoid catching your scent. You do not blame them. Everyone is fighting their own battles, and the smell of unwashed wool does not make theirs easier. Still, the small rejections add up, collecting in the spaces between heartbeats until they begin to feel heavy. Yet, strangely, there are moments when the stigma becomes a badge instead of a burden. When a fellow rough sleeper nods to you on the street with a look of silent recognition, you feel seen in a way no clean passerby could offer. When someone shares half of a stale roll with you without asking for anything in return, you feel valued in a way that does not depend on appearance or scent. These small gestures form a thread of quiet dignity that runs beneath the harshness of public judgment. You learn to navigate the city with a new kind of awareness, understanding which streets welcome you and which ones pretend not to see you. The stairs still come, but they no longer unravel you. You carry the nights with you, the ropes, the benches, the wooden boxes, and all the wisdom gained in spaces most people would refuse to imagine. You walk forward, tired but steady. And in time, you learn that being visibly worn does not diminish your worth, no matter how many people try to convince you otherwise. You do not expect kindness from strangers. Most days, you brace yourself for the wary glances, the stiffened posture, the way people pull their coats a little tighter as you pass. You grow used to occupying the edges of the city, slipping through the cracks between those who have enough and those who pretend they do. But every so often, a small gesture breaks through the gray of daily survival, and it startles you with its warmth. These moments arrive without warning, like lanterns appearing out of fog, brief but bright enough to guide you through the darker stretches. The first comes on a morning when your legs ache from another night suspended over a rope. You shuffle toward a bakery, driven more by the smell of warm bread than any real hope of affording it. A woman tending the stall eyes you carefully, not with suspicion, but with recognition. Without a word, she reaches into a basket and hands you a roll that is only slightly misshapen, the kind that cannot be sold but still holds heat from the oven. She waves away your attempt to offer a few coins, insisting that everyone deserves something warm now and again. When you take a bite, steam curls into the cold morning air, and for a moment you feel like the city is capable of gentleness. Later, a lamplighter pauses beside you as you try to shake life back into your feet. He comments on the weather, the kind of harmless remark people make to pass time, but his voice carries a quiet sympathy you did not expect. He tells you where the shelters are less crowded tonight, which corners of the city hold warmth in their brickwork after dusk. His map of the streets is not drawn on paper but in memory and muscle, and he shares it with you freely, as though you are just another traveler rather than someone stumbling through the day on tired legs. When he moves on, leaving a trail of soft light behind him, you feel less alone in the fading daylight. A constable surprises you next. You expect the usual warning, the sharp reminder to move along, but instead he gestures toward a doorway where the wind does not quite reach. He tells you to rest there a while, just until the cold loses its bite. His tone is gruff, almost annoyed, as if kindness is a habit he is trying to hide. He even drops a thick woolen glove near your feet as he leaves. You pretend not to notice until he is out of sight. When you pick it up, the wool is warm from his hand, and you slip it on without second thought. Then there is the carriage driver, who finds you hesitating at a busy crossing, half asleep on your feet. He does not scold you for drifting into the road. Instead, he offers a steady hand on your arm and a quick laugh, saying that even the horses get drowsy sometimes. He waits until you regain your balance, then tips his hat before guiding his horse forward again. His kindness is simple and unpolished, the sort that comes from someone who has known exhaustion himself. But the kindness that stays with you the longest comes one night in the four-penny coffin. A man you barely know notices your blanket slipping from your shoulder as you settle into your box. Without a word, he reaches over and tucks it back into place, making sure the fabric covers your chest before he returns to his own space. The gesture is small, almost nothing, but it carries the weight of shared hardship, of unspoken understanding. It lingers in the air long after his breathing steadies into sleep. These moments do not solve everything. They do not fix the cold or the hunger or the relentless fatigue that shapes each night, but they soften the edges. They remind you that not everyone turns away. Some see you not as a problem or a warning, but as a person navigating the same difficult world they inhabit. Their kindness becomes a quiet thread in your days, something you hold on to when the city feels too large and indifferent. And as you walk through London's shifting shadows, you carry those moments with you, small beacons that glow long after the strangers have disappeared into the crowd. Hunger becomes the quiet companion that follows you through every street and every shelter, shaping your choices long before you admit how much power it holds. It starts as a faint tug in your stomach, the kind you can ignore if you walk briskly enough or distract yourself with the city's noise. But as the hours pass and the night settles around you, the tug sharpens into something more insistent, a constant reminder that food has become a luxury measured in crumbs and kindness. You begin to understand why people select their sleeping spots, not just based on warmth or safety, but on the possibility of waking near something edible. By evening, you scan the streets with new eyes. A baker's shop becomes a beacon, not because the ovens stay warm into the night, but because the alley behind it sometimes holds crusts discarded when no one is watching. You do not fight others for them. You have learned enough etiquette among the rough sleepers to know that competition only sours what little community exists. Instead, you drift near the familiar spots, hoping the moment arrives when the workers sweep out the day's remnants with less scrutiny than usual. Some nights you are lucky. More often, you are not. Hunger changes the way you think about shelter too. A place close to the docks might offer stronger winds and colder floors, but it also brings the chance of leftover fish scraps, the kind workers toss aside without ceremony. You weigh the choice each night, debating whether a full stomach is worth the sting of the wind's bite. More than once you choose the harsher path, telling yourself that sleep comes easier when your belly holds something, even if that something is barely recognizable as food. When you can afford the penny, sit up, you find yourself calculating more than just the price. You consider whether the route there passes the vegetable market at closing time, when the stalls throw away wilted leaves and bruised roots that still contain enough substance to quiet the worst of the ache. Sometimes the vendors pretend not to see you picking through what they leave behind, and sometimes they offer a nod that feels dangerously close to kindness. A few even slide you the best of the unwanted pieces, insisting they would only spoil otherwise. Hunger creeps into your nights in the rope room as well. You lean forward, your ribs pressed against the coarse fibers, trying to ignore the hollow sensation that grows louder than the snores around you. The strange half-standing posture pulls your thoughts into strange patterns, and more than once you drift into a dream where you sit at a table overflowing with bread and meat pies, only to wake to the sharp disappointment of your real surroundings. You learn to steady yourself with small tricks, like imagining the warmth of food rather than its taste, or breathing slowly until the pangs fade into something manageable. The four-penny coffin offers the closest thing to peace, but even then, hunger finds you when you least expect it. Lying flat makes you more aware of the emptiness within you, the quiet ache that pulses in the stillness. Some nights, you hear another sleeper's stomach growl, and you exchange a tired laugh with them because humor, thin and fragile as it is, becomes another way to share the burden. The boxes create privacy, but the shared silence reminds you that everyone around you carries their own quiet hunger. You make choices based on food without meaning to. You linger near the places where dock workers finish late, hoping they toss aside bits of bread or cold potatoes. You sleep closer to the markets on certain nights, even if it means braving louder crowds and colder stones. You even learn to time your wanderings based on when the city's scraps become available, moving like someone following an invisible map drawn by appetite. Hunger shapes your nights, not through desperation, but through practicality. It teaches you to listen to your body, to anticipate its needs, to seek small moments of nourishment wherever they appear. You adapt to its rhythm the way you have adapted to the ropes and the benches and the wooden boxes. And though it never leaves you entirely, you learn how to move with it rather than be consumed by it. By the time you settle into another night's shelter, your body tired and your stomach still echoing its complaint, you understand that hunger is not just a sensation here. It is a compass. It guides you through the darkness, pointing you towards survival, one careful decision at a time. The city begins speaking long before the sun fully sets, its voice rising from every cobblestone and alleyway with the layered confidence of a place that never truly sleeps. You learn to listen to it the way sailors learn to read the tides, because the soundscape of Victorian nights is not just background noise. It is information, warning, comedy, and company woven into one restless chorus. Each night, as you search for a corner to rest your aching body, the city's sounds fold around you like a patchwork blanket stitched from chaos. The first sound to greet you is usually the rumble of carriage wheels, rolling over uneven stones with a rhythm that changes depending on the driver's mood and the horse's level of enthusiasm. Some wheels move with a steady clatter, the kind that suggests a respectable family returning home late. Others rattle wildly, as though the driver has lost faith in both his steering and the concept of slowing down. The horses snort clouds of steam into the cold air, their hooves striking sparks you swear you can almost see even in the dim glow of the gas lamps. Then comes the shouting. It arrives from everywhere at once. A mixture of dock workers finishing their shifts, street vendors who refuse to accept that the day has ended, and groups of men who have clearly spent far too much time in taverns with sticky floors. Their voices bounce between the narrow buildings, creating a kind of accidental orchestra that changes tempo without warning. You get used to the way laughter blends with anger, how cheers can turn into arguments in the span of a few heartbeats, and how the city itself seems to lean in to listen. You hear the river too, even when you cannot see it. The Thames speaks in low murmurs, sloshing against the embankments with a patience that borders on unsettling. Mixed with its voice is the creak of wooden boats, shifting against their ropes, and the occasional splash that makes you turn your head, wondering whether it was a fish, a stray boot, or something better left unidentified. Fog drifts over the water some nights, carrying the muffled cries of sailors calling to one another, their shouts softened by distance until they sound like echoes from another world. Closer to the shelters, the sounds change again. In the penny sit-ups, you hear the constant shuffling of feet as people adjust their weight, followed by the tired sighs of those who have accepted that comfort is not part of tonight's arrangement. Someone coughs in a way that suggests they have been coughing for years. Someone else mutters in their sleep, words scrambled by exhaustion until they barely resemble speech. The benches creak like old bones adjusting themselves, and occasionally the entire room grows strangely quiet, as though everyone has fallen half asleep at the same moment before waking again with a jerk. The two-penny hangover room introduces you to new sounds entirely. The rope itself groans under the collective weight of weary bodies, and the soft thuds of people shifting against it form a rhythm that borders on hypnotic. Conversations float through the dim space, spoken in voices softened by fatigue. You hear a joke whispered on one side, the punchline drifting upward with the warmth of breath. Someone snores while half suspended, creating a strange vibrating sound that you would find amusing if you were not fighting sleep yourself. Even the 4-penny coffin has a distinct soundscape. The wooden boxes click softly as people settle into them, the lids and sides expanding with warmth. Blankets rustle with intention as each sleeper tries to trap what little heat they can. The breathing in this room is different, more even, more human, less frantic. It becomes a quiet lullaby that reminds you that rest, though rare, is still possible. Through it all, the city continues humming, a restless creature that refuses to fade into silence. When you finally drift toward sleep, the sounds blend together into a single, ever-shifting melody that wraps around you. You listen because it keeps you company, because it teaches you where you are safe and where you should move on, and because in a strange way, it reminds you that you are part of this place now, stitched into its nightly rhythm, like another thread in its endless tapestry. And as you close your eyes, the sounds continue without you, reminding you that London carries on, tireless and loud, even when you can no longer keep your head upright. You see the workhouse for the first time on a gray afternoon when the fog feels heavier than usual, clinging to your clothes as though it wants to guide you toward the entrance. You are not close, not nearly close enough to be mistaken for someone seeking admission, but even from a distance, the building has a presence that makes your chest tighten. It rises out of the haze like a stern reminder carved in brick and stone, its windows narrow, its walls tall enough to swallow hope along with the people who enter. You have heard whispers about it for weeks, murmured warnings from long-term sleepers and muttered stories traded in line at cheap bakeries, but nothing prepares you for seeing it with your own eyes. The place looks more like a fortress than shelter. A wide gate stands open, but not invitingly. It yawns like the mouth of something that has no intention of letting you leave once you step through. The people approaching it move quietly, their shoulders rounded inward, their steps slow and resigned. They are not going because they want to. They are going because all other choices have been stripped away. Watching them, you feel something cold slip down your spine, a sensation sharper than the winter wind. A constable strolls by, giving you a glance that lingers just long enough to remind you of your place in this hierarchy. He does not need to say anything. His eyes flick toward the workhouse and then back to you, delivering a silent message that you have no desire to receive. You step away instinctively, putting distance between yourself and the looming walls. Even the air feels different here, as if the building exhales its own brand of despair. Stories come back to you while you stand there, piecing themselves together with unpleasant clarity. Nights in the rope room and mornings spent searching for scraps suddenly sound, almost luxurious compared to the tales of long hours spent breaking stones or picking oakum until your fingers blister. You remember someone saying that once inside, the rules tighten around you like ropes of their own, offering food and shelter in exchange for your freedom, your family if you have one, and your pride. The meals are thin, the beds hard, and the routine strict enough to grind a person into something smaller than who they once were. You watch a woman enter, holding the hand of a little boy who looks too tired to cry. She does not meet your eyes, and you cannot blame her. You do not think you could handle seeing sympathy reflected back at you right now. The boy turns once before disappearing through the gate, his gaze lingering on the street as though memorizing it, knowing he may not see it again for some time. The gatekeeper steps aside, and the pair vanish into the dim interior. The door does not slam shut, but you hear the finality in the soft thud all the same. Fear settles in your chest with a weight that has nothing to do with hunger or cold. The workhouse becomes a boundary line in your mind, the place you refuse to cross, no matter how difficult the nights become. You find yourself reconsidering every decision from that moment on. You choose the rope room over a night spent searching too far from familiar streets. You pick through market scraps with more determination. You accept worn blankets from strangers, swallow pride when necessary, and laugh at jokes that are not particularly funny, simply because shared humor keeps you anchored to the world outside those walls. The sight of the workhouse alters something in you. It sharpens your instinct to survive on your own terms, Fragile as they may be, you walk away from it slowly at first. Then, with quickening steps, your breath misting the air as though you need to outrun the shadow it casts. And though the building disappears behind the fog, the fear remains, guiding your choices with stubborn persistence. It becomes a quiet vow within you. No matter how cold the nights grow or how empty your stomach feels, you will do everything in your power to avoid passing through those gates. You learn early that a single coin carries more power over your night than any constable, any shelter attendant, or any bit of advice muttered through chattering teeth. It becomes a small, worn piece of metal that dictates not only where you sleep, but how you navigate every hour leading up to it. When you find yourself holding one, just one, the entire city rearranges itself in your mind, presenting paths that were invisible a moment earlier. The penny seems to glow faintly in your palm, not with value, but with possibility. During the day, you watch how others guard their coins. Some keep them clenched in a fist as though the air itself might steal them. Others tuck them deep into pockets secured with improvised stitching. You do the same because you understand now that losing a coin does not simply mean misfortune. It means surrendering comfort, warmth, and a chance at sleep that does not involve leaning against a wall while pretending you are perfectly content with the arrangement. Holding a penny sit-up coin gives your steps an almost buoyant energy. Suddenly you can afford to think about sleep in a structured way rather than a desperate one. You can look forward to a bench, an actual piece of wood meant for sitting rather than for scavenging. You imagine the hour or two of semi-rest in an upright position, your body protesting but at least receiving something. The knowledge steadies you throughout the evening. You begin making decisions based on how to preserve that small luxury. You avoid arguments, steer clear of unpredictable groups, and refuse to take shortcuts through alleys that seem one gust of wind away from trouble. If you manage to gather 2 pennies, your entire outlook shifts again. 2 pennies mean the rope room, that strange, awkward, halfway intimacy with gravity. It is not comfort, not even close, but it is significantly better than wandering the streets until dawn. With 2 pennies, you begin to measure the night in stages. You can imagine your body settling into the familiar lean, your arms folding over the coarse rope, your head sagging forward with the determined grace of someone who has accepted strange circumstances and made peace with them. Those 2 coins guide your choices like a compass. When you fall short, the opposite happens. Without a coin in your pocket, the city feels larger, colder, and more indifferent. Every street seems longer. Every market stall looks guarded. The shelters loom like distant dreams rather than reachable destinations. You begin to calculate the distance between warm chimneys and covered stoops, places where you can hide from the wind, but not from the ache in your legs. The absence of a coin turns you into a strategist, searching for corners with the least draft, scanning for constables who mistake exhaustion for mischief. Your night becomes a chess match played against hunger and fatigue, and neither opponent plays kindly. There are moments when someone hands you a coin unexpectedly, and the simple kindness nearly knocks the breath from your chest. You feel the night transform in real time. The cold seems less sharp, the streets feel less threatening. The shelters become landmarks rather than warnings. You realize how quickly a single coin can pull you back from the edge of despair and into the realm of manageable hardship. You also learn the subtle difference between choosing and enduring. When you have a coin, you choose your spot. When you do not, the night chooses for you. And the night rarely has your best interests in mind. You begin to understand the economics of poverty, not through lectures or pamphlets, but through the sound a coin makes when it touches your palm. It is a light sound, almost insignificant, yet it carries the weight of whether you will lean, hang, lie down, or wander until your legs can no longer carry you. That tiny clink becomes the hinge upon which your entire night swings, shaping every step long before you reach the shelter door. You begin to realize that surviving the night in Victorian London is not just about endurance. It is about improvisation. Everyone you meet carries some small talent or trick that keeps them a step ahead of the cold and a few coins closer to a rope or a box. The ingenuity around you is so constant that it almost becomes an art form, a collection of quiet hustles stitched together by necessity. You start paying attention, watching how others move through the city with deliberate resourcefulness. And little by little, you learn the unwritten techniques that keep people afloat. Some start with their voices. Street singers appear near taverns just as patrons spill out, their tunes drifting through the air like hopeful bait. The voices are not always good, but they are enthusiastic. And enthusiasm, paired with a catchy chorus, can loosen even the tightest purse strings after a few pints. You watch one man shift effortlessly from love songs to lively shanties, depending on the mood of the crowd. And by the time the tavern shutters close, he has collected enough coins for a night in the hangover room with a small snack on the side. He winks at you as he counts them, as though to say the secret lies not in talent but in timing. Others rely on their hands. You meet a woman who can mend anything with only a needle, a bit of thread, and the stubborn determination of someone who knows that every stitch means another hour indoors. She sits under a gas lamp, repairing torn gloves and frayed hems, earning copper coins one careful repair at a time. Her fingers move with a confidence that comes from practice, and people trust her work enough to return when their clothes betray them again. She tells you that needles are cheaper than hunger, and you believe her. Some create small performances. You see a boy who juggles apples that are clearly past their prime, his expression focused as he tosses them higher with each round. The apples wobble dangerously, sometimes landing with dull thuds, but the boy bows dramatically after every attempt, no matter how ridiculous the outcome. The act earns him enough to avoid sleeping on bare cobblestones, and he seems content with that victory each night. His laughter feels strangely contagious, a reminder that even the smallest bit of joy has value here. Then there are those who deal in information. They watch the city shift, noting which bakeries discard their scraps early, which markets loosen their prices near closing, and which shelters tend to fill faster than usual. They whisper these insights to anyone who can spare a coin. You quickly learn that knowledge is its own currency, one often more valuable than money itself. A single hint about a newly generous vendor can mean the difference between an empty stomach and a warm crust of bread. Some rely on charm far more than skill. You watch a man with a friendly smile and a knack for harmless chatter offer to carry baskets for shoppers making their way through crowded lanes. He flatters them with practiced ease, praising their taste, their hats, their choice of vegetables. Many laugh and hand him a penny for his trouble, impressed by nothing more than his ability to make a mundane task feel pleasant. He tells you that people like feeling seen, and if making them feel important keeps him off the streets for a night, then it is a trade worth mastering. You even see hustles so simple they border on genius. Someone might sweep a section of sidewalk with a borrowed broom, presenting themselves as an indispensable part of the neighborhood. Another person offers directions to places you already know, but delivers them with such thoroughness that you feel compelled to pay for the experience. A man with a tin of cheap polish scrubs boots with a fervor that would impress a general, and people reward him for the enthusiasm alone. Through all of this, you notice that everyone shares the same goal. Every coin earned, every trick practiced, every scrap collected is another step toward a place to rest. It does not matter if that place is a rope, a bench, or a narrow wooden box. What matters is shelter, however modest, however temporary. Soon, you begin to pick up habits of your own. You help carry crates at the docks when the workers need an extra pair of hands. You offer directions to confused travelers with enough confidence that they assume you know the city better than you do. You sweep steps, hold doors, run small errands, and discover that small gestures accumulate into small rewards. Each coin feels like a triumph, a quiet victory over the night. And in these improvisations, you see not just struggle, but a kind of resilience that binds everyone together. Survival becomes a shared skill, learned through observation, practiced with determination, and, refined by necessity. You hear the preacher long before you see him. His voice rises above the clatter of carriage wheels and the murmurs of evening crowds, carrying that familiar booming certainty only someone convinced of their own righteousness can summon. You groan inwardly, because you already know the speech before he gives it. He is one of the many who appear like clockwork whenever the streets grow crowded, determined to save every wandering soul, whether that soul asked for saving or not. You try to slip past unnoticed, but his gaze lands on you with the accuracy of someone who has been practicing all day. He steps forward, robes flapping dramatically in the wind, like a particularly judgmental curtain. He tells you that the path you walk leads only to ruin, that the filth on your coat and the exhaustion in your eyes are signs of moral decay rather than the result of nights spent suspended over a rope. You try to explain, but he is not interested in explanations. He launches into a sweeping lecture about responsibility, self-control, and the dangers of vice. You stand there, too tired to argue, wondering if he has ever slept upright in a crowded shelter or fought for a scrap of bread behind a row of market stalls. His voice drones on, a relentless stream of warnings and scripture that flutter through the air like leaves caught in a storm. Eventually, he moves on to another target, satisfied that he has planted a seed of redemption in your weary mind. You walk away quickly, grateful for the return of ordinary noises. Yet you do not get far before another moralist appears, this one holding pamphlets stacked high in her arms. She thrusts one toward you before you can escape, her smile wide and practiced. The pamphlet warns against sloth, drink, and poor companionship, illustrated with drawings of hollow-eyed figures who look suspiciously like the very people she is preaching to. When you tell her you cannot read, she only brightens further, delighted at the chance to read every line aloud with theatrical emphasis. By the time she finishes, you have heard so many threats of eternal consequences that the cold wind feels cheerful by comparison. You encounter these people often enough that you begin to recognize their types. Some preach fire and punishment, their voices sharp enough to wake the dead. Others prefer gentler tones, telling you that your suffering is a test designed to make you grateful later. A few offer food with their sermons, which softens the lecture only slightly. You notice quickly that their kindness comes with strings, each one tugging you toward a future you are told to aspire to, but have no means of reaching. They speak of pulling oneself up, of choosing virtue over vice, as though these choices are as simple as selecting a hat from a well-stocked shelf. One night, you meet a group of young moralists, distributing tracts near the rope room. Their faces are clean, their clothes crisp, and their eagerness blinding. They surround a cluster of exhausted sleepers, offering advice with the enthusiasm of people who have never missed a meal. One of them tells you that true rest comes from spiritual purity. Another suggests that your situation might improve if you avoid sinful behaviors such as idleness. You resist the urge to laugh, not because their intentions are cruel, but because their understanding is so painfully thin. You tell them gently that sometimes idleness is not a vice, but a luxury you cannot afford. Yet not all preachers are unbearable. Occasionally you meet one who listens rather than lectures. An older man stops you one evening and asks how long you have been sleeping rough. His voice is quiet, his posture humble, and he does not flinch when he hears the truth. He offers you a cup of hot broth without demanding your soul in return. He tells you he once slept under the bridges himself, back when his life carried more hardship than hope. The conversation leaves you unexpectedly lighter, not because he saved you, but because he treated you like someone worth speaking to. Still, for every preacher who understands, there are many who do not. They speak at you, not to you, their words shaped by assumptions rather than compassion. You learn to navigate them the same way you navigate puddles in smoky alleys, stepping carefully around their convictions. Their speeches fill the streets as often as the wind, yet they bounce off you more softly now that you know the truth. Only those who have lived the nights you live can tell you anything worth hearing. You start noticing the devices before anyone explains them to you. They appear on street corners and outside shop fronts like odd little sentinels, each one claiming to solve a problem no one bothered to ask the rough sleepers about. Some look harmless at first, even quirky, until you realize their true purpose is not to help you, but to push you along, to keep the city tidy by making sure people like you never linger. Victorian ingenuity, it seems, has been poured generously into the art of discomfort. The first odd invention you encounter is a set of slanted benches installed near a busy market. From afar, they look like any other place to rest, but when you try to sit, the angle sends you sliding forward until your feet hit the cobblestones. A man across the street smirks knowingly as he watches you struggle, and a fruit seller calls out that they were designed by a local counselor who wanted to prevent loafing. You tell him that loafing is difficult even with a proper bench, let alone a wooden ramp pretending to be one. He laughs and tosses you an apple that has seen better days, which helps take the sting out of the humiliation. Then there are the curfew posts, tall iron poles with small lamps at the top, placed at intervals near the wealthier districts. Each has a plaque warning vagrants against loitering after a certain hour. The warning feels unnecessary, as the constables make sure no one forgets. The lamps burn with an officious glow, casting long shadows that seem specifically designed to expose anyone trying to hide. You find yourself avoiding these streets entirely, not because you are afraid of being caught, but because the lamps make you feel like a specimen pinned under glass. You also come across a curious wheeled contraption operated by a man who introduces himself as a patroller. His device looks like a cross between a pushcart and a large wooden drum. When he rolls it down the street, the drum clangs loudly with each revolution, its noise reverberating through narrow lanes. He claims it is meant to warn honest citizens of the patrol's presence. You know it is meant to scare away anyone attempting to sleep in doorways. The sound is so obnoxious that even the rats scatter when they hear it approaching. You wonder whether the man feels proud of his invention or whether he simply enjoys having a job that allows him to make noise without consequence. One night you stumble upon a more subtle gadget, a metal grate placed over a warm vent behind a bakery. It used to be a favored spot for rough sleepers seeking a few hours of comfort in winter. Now the grate is shaped into small iron peaks, not sharp enough to injure, but unpleasant enough to make lying down impossible. You crouch beside it, feeling the trapped warmth drift upward, tantalizing and unreachable. A baker's apprentice emerges from the back door, shaking his head apologetically. He tells you the grate was installed after two gentlemen complained about the sight of people resting there. He says it quietly, as though ashamed on behalf of the entire street. Even the rope rooms feel the influence of such inventions. You notice new hooks and rails installed to keep bodies arranged neatly, as if the entire purpose of the place is not to offer minimal mercy, but to make sure the sleepers resemble tidy bundles. A fellow rough sleeper jokes that soon they will start labeling everyone like parcels. You laugh, but the image is not difficult to imagine. Some inventions try to disguise themselves as charitable. A man proudly displays a folding shelter he designed, a wooden structure intended to keep vagrants organized. He demonstrates how it collapses into a narrow corridor with just enough space to sit upright. You recognize immediately that it is nothing more than a coffin without a lid, a way to stack people like objects. He asks for your opinion, and you tell him honestly that you would rather sleep under a bridge. He seems surprised, as though comfort was never part of his calculations. These gadgets dot the streets like relics of a society determined to manage poverty rather than understand it. They remind you constantly that you are expected to move, to disappear, to endure without leaving traces. Yet you also learn to navigate around them, to outsmart their designers with the quiet ingenuity shared among those who know what it means to survive outdoors. And as you walk through the city, weaving past tilted benches, noisy patrols, and iron grates meant to discourage rest, you realize that every odd invention only strengthens your resolve. If the city insists on pushing you along, then you will keep moving, one careful step at a time, The storm announces itself long before it breaks. The wind grows restless first, brushing past you with the sharp impatience of someone late for an appointment, tugging at your coat as though testing its resolve. The sky darkens too quickly to be natural, clouds sliding across the rooftops like a gathering army. You know what is coming. Every rough sleeper knows. Nights like this become whispered, warnings passed among you throughout the day, the kind that spark a quiet urgency beneath each step. By the time the first drops fall, the scramble has already begun. People who normally drift through the streets at an unhurried pace suddenly move with purpose, scanning alleyways and archways, searching for any corner that might offer even a hint of dryness. You follow a group toward a familiar row of shop fronts, but the best spots disappear quickly, claimed by those who have faster feet or longer experience. You settle for the edge of a sheltered doorway, only to be nudged aside by a constable who reminds you, without much kindness, that loitering is prohibited. You mutter something under your breath and keep moving. Rain begins to fall in sheets, not drops, hitting the cobblestones with such force that it seems determined to push everything flat. The wind whips the water sideways, making every attempt to shield yourself feel foolish. You duck beneath a bridge, but a dozen others have had the same idea. Bodies pressed together in a cramped line, each person trying to shield themselves while avoiding the worst of the runoff trickling down the stone. A man with a ragged hat tells you the river is likely to rise, and his warning sends a few people scrambling away. You hesitate, then decide he is probably right. The storm worsens. You try the butcher's awning, but the meat hooks sway ominously overhead, and the canopy drips steadily down your neck. The baker's back alley is warmer, but the new iron grate keeps anyone from lying down near the vent. You crouch for a moment anyway, letting the small pocket of heat soak into your palms before someone else politely coughs behind you, waiting for their turn. When thunder cracks across the sky, the scramble becomes near frantic. You spot a group heading toward the rope room, their feet slapping against the wet pavement. You hurry after them, the thought of even half-suspended sleep suddenly appealing compared to the open sky. But when you arrive, the attendant at the door shakes his head. Full, completely full. You try to peer inside, but the door shuts before you can catch more than a glimpse of tightly packed bodies leaning over ropes, grateful not to be outside. You turn toward the four-penny coffin house next. You know it will be full too. But the thought of lying flat, even in a wooden box, fuels your hope. You hurry through puddles that have grown into miniature ponds, your shoes soaking through in an instant. When you reach the building, a line snakes out the door. You join it anyway, because on a night like this, even waiting feels like survival. The line shuffles forward slowly, tension thick in the air as everyone wonders if there will be enough spaces. There are not. The attendant stops the line just 3 people ahead of you. A woman behind you curses softly, and a man near the front starts bargaining, offering coins he does not actually have. It changes nothing. The door closes, muffling the warmth inside. You stand for a moment in the rain, letting the truth settle. Then, with no other choice, you search again. You find a narrow gap between 2 buildings, just wide enough to shield you from the worst of the wind. It is not warm, and it is not entirely dry, but it is something. You slide down the wall, pulling your coat tight around your shoulders, feeling the cold seep slowly into your bones. Someone else joins you, nodding in tired understanding as they curl into the opposite corner. The storm rages, water drumming rhythmically against brick and stone. You listen to it with a kind of resignation, knowing that nights like this are part of the unspoken contract you never meant to sign. Yet you also feel a stubborn spark within you, the same one that has carried you through every difficult night before. You will endure this one too. You learn quickly that constables view the streets differently than you do. Where you see a place to rest your aching legs or wait out a cold gust of wind, they see a problem that needs clearing. Their boots strike the cobblestones with crisp authority, echoing through alleys long before their voices arrive. The sound alone prompts rough sleepers to shift, straighten, or melt deeper into shadows, each person adjusting themselves with the quiet instinct of someone who has been scolded enough times to anticipate the pattern. Your first direct encounter sets the tone. You settle under a shop awning, trying to coax warmth back into your fingers, when a constable approaches and taps his baton against the ground beside you. He avoids eye contact, speaking as though he is reciting from a handbook. Move along. Not permitted. Orders from above. You rise without arguing, because you can tell he is not angry, only weary, performing his duty like someone sweeping leaves that refuse to stay in his pile. Still, the dismissal stings, as though your simple need to sit has suddenly become a kind of offense. Other constables are less restrained. One evening you pause beneath a gas lamp to adjust your boots, and a sharp whistle pierces the air. The constable strides toward you with exaggerated purpose, telling you that standing still is suspicious at this hour. You stare at him, wondering how one is meant to walk without occasionally stopping, but you swallow the remark and step away. His expression softens a little, and for a moment you see something almost sympathetic before he hides it behind formality again. The tension grows thicker in the busier parts of the city. In the markets, constables patrol like shepherds guiding a flock they do not entirely trust. They watch every movement of the unhoused with a vigilance reserved for pickpockets or troublemakers. You feel their gaze long before you see them, a prickling awareness that settles between your shoulder blades. Sometimes they approach slowly, as though giving you time to remove yourself without the embarrassment of being told to do so. Other times, they appear suddenly, pushing you along with curt gestures that leave no room for argument. Yet you notice something else too. Some constables look troubled when they shoo people from doorsteps or warm bricks, aware that they are enforcing rules designed to keep the streets tidy rather than keep people safe. Few speak in hushed tones, apologizing under their breath before urging you onward. One even drops a quiet warning about an approaching patrol known for being less forgiving, giving you just enough time to slip away before trouble arrives. His kindness is awkward, almost reluctant, but it stays with you long after the conversation ends. Still, the divide between the law and the poor widens most noticeably at night. The darker the streets become, the more determined the patrols grow. They search for anyone trying to settle in alleys, behind stables, or under stairways, their lanterns sweeping across bricks like judgment made visible. You tense at the sight of the light, the way others do, preparing your story even if no one asks for it. You are simply resting. You are keeping warm. You are not causing trouble. You are trying to get through the night like everyone else. There are moments when frustration simmers in the air. You see a man mutter curses under his breath after being moved, for the third time in 1 hour. You see a young sleeper stiffen with anger when a constable knocks on the wood beside him a little too loudly. You see tempers spark like flint, only to be swallowed again by the knowledge that arguing leads nowhere good. Yet beneath all the tension lies an unspoken truth. Constables and rough sleepers share the same streets, breathe the same smoky air, and endure the same nights made colder by the river's breath. They are not enemies, not really, but they stand on opposite sides of a line drawn by people who never walk these streets after dark. And you learn to walk that line carefully, always aware of the baton's tap, the lantern's sweep, and the quiet hope that one night you might pass without being told to move at all. Luck begins so quietly that you almost miss it. It starts with the weather, a rare evening when the wind feels more like a tired sigh than a threat, and the clouds drift lazily instead of plotting ways to soak you. The air carries the faint smell of roasted chestnuts, which you take as an omen, even though chestnuts have never guaranteed anything except mild disappointment. Still, you let yourself hope, because hope is a small warmth of its own. Your first stroke of fortune arrives near the market. A vendor closing his stall spots you lingering at a respectful distance and asks if you want the last loaf that failed to sell. It is misshapen and slightly burnt, but when he hands it to you, it feels warm through the paper. Real warmth. You tear into it as you walk, letting the heat spread through your fingers and belly until your shoulders loosen in a way they have not for days. A small thing, but it feels like the night has opened one eye and decided to be generous. Then you find a coin. It lies half hidden near the gutter, glinting in the lamplight as though it has been waiting specifically for you. You pick it up quickly, surprised no one noticed it sooner. With that coin in your pocket, everything shifts. The rope room becomes not just possible, but probable. You walk a little straighter, feeling almost triumphant, though you do your best not to look too proud. The city punishes pride swiftly. As you make your way toward the shelter, you pass a lamplighter who nods at you in a way that feels almost friendly. A constable walks by without asking you to move along. A passing horse does not splash you with the usual gutter water. Each tiny mercy adds up until you start glancing upward, half expecting the sky to wink at you. By the time you reach the rope house, a small crowd has gathered. Normally this sight would sink your spirits, but the attendant steps outside and counts the line with a thoughtful frown. When he reaches you, he gestures you forward, telling you there is room for a few more. You follow him inside, trying not to grin outright. The room is dim and crowded, but the warmth hits you the moment you step through the door. Bodies and lantern heat mingle into something close to comfort. You take your place along the rope, settling your arms over it with practiced ease. The rope feels gentler tonight, softer somehow, as though it understands you have earned a moment of peace. Your back stretches without the usual strain, and for once your legs do not tremble from fatigue. A man beside you cracks a joke about finally being indoors before midnight, and you laugh with genuine ease, surprised at how light the sound feels in your chest. As the room settles into its familiar chorus of shifting bodies and tired murmurs, you drift into a peculiar half-sleep. It is the kind that arrives not out of desperation but contentment, a slow surrender to warmth and safety. You feel suspended not just physically but emotionally, floating between wakefulness and rest in a way that feels almost luxurious. Hours pass without interruption. No sudden shouts from the street, no scuffles near the door, no cold drafts sneaking in through cracks. The room holds steady, wrapping everyone in a rare and unexpected gentleness. For once, the city seems uninterested in challenging you. It lets you be. When dawn finally arrives, it does so softly, light seeping in through dusty windows without fanfare. You step outside, feeling steadier than usual, your body balanced, your mind clear, your stomach filled with the memory of warm bread. It is not perfection, it is not a transformation, but it is enough to remind you that even in a life built out of struggle, a single good night can feel like a treasure. And you carry that feeling with you, tucked somewhere safe, knowing it will help you face the nights that will not be so kind. After enough nights spent hunched, folded, propped, or dangling, you begin to feel your mind changing in small, peculiar ways. It happens slowly, like a draft creeping under a door. At first you notice only the physical strain, the stiffness in your neck, the dull ache in your lower back, the way your arms tingled after too many hours draped over a rope. But as the nights stretch into one another, blurred by exhaustion and the absence of anything resembling true rest, the strain begins to slip inward, settling somewhere deeper. You start forgetting what it feels like to lie fully stretched out on a soft bed. Your memories conjure a mattress that seems impossibly plush, as though you once slept on a cloud rather than whatever worn cot or lumpy straw pallet you used to have. The more distant that memory becomes, the more the city's improvised arrangements feel like your only reality. You adapt because you must, convincing yourself that your body can tolerate another night of contortion, another morning of shaking stiffness from your limbs. Your mind learns strange habits, too. Every time you settle against a wall or over a rope, you calculate escape routes without thinking. You keep half an ear open for constables, half an eye on other sleepers just in case someone wakes confused or desperate. Even in moments when nothing threatens you, your thoughts hover in that anxious middle ground between vigilance and weariness. Sleep becomes a negotiation rather than a relief. There are days when your mood sinks without any clear cause. You wake from a few scattered hours of rest, feeling as though a fog has wrapped itself around your head. Simple tasks require focus. Conversations slip past you. The world feels slightly out of reach, as though you are watching life happen from behind thick glass. You tell yourself it is only fatigue, but the heaviness lingers longer than you expect. It sits with you on street corners and follows you into shelters, an invisible companion you never invited. The worst moments come when morning arrives and you realize you are just as tired as when you closed your eyes. Your body protests, your thoughts wander, and your sense of time wavers. Days blur. You begin measuring life, not by hours, but by whether you can find enough warmth to stay upright. The lack of proper rest twists your perception, making ordinary frustrations feel sharper. A cold gust feels like a personal attack. A dropped coin feels like a calamity. A joke from another sleeper might strike you as suddenly hilarious or unexpectedly cruel. Yet you also notice how your mind clings to small comforts with fierce determination. A shared laugh. A crumb of warmth from someone's coat brushing yours. A rare moment when you manage to doze without interruption. These tiny fragments become anchors, reminders that you have not drifted entirely into numbness. You hold on to them because they prove that you can still feel something other than exhaustion. Still, the toll accumulates. Some evenings, you catch your reflection in a darkened window and barely recognize the person staring back. Eyes dull, shoulders tense, posture shaped by too many nights without a real bed. You wonder how long the human mind can endure this constant state of almost sleeping, almost resting, almost recovering. You wonder whether the city knows what it asks of those left to wander its edges. And yet you press on, not because you feel strong, but because you have no choice. You move from one makeshift arrangement to the next, seeking whatever scrap of comfort the night allows. You remind yourself that morning will come again, even if it brings only a thin light and a tired body. Somewhere deep inside, a small part of you still believes that there will be a night when you truly rest. It is that fragile, stubborn belief that keeps you walking, even when your mind feels worn thin by too many sleepless hours and too many hard places to lay your head. You do not expect change to begin on an ordinary morning, yet it starts with nothing more dramatic than a conversation spoken half asleep. You are lingering outside a bakery, savoring the warm breath drifting from its ovens, when an older man you have seen in shelters before settles beside you. His coat is threadbare, his beard uneven, but his eyes carry a spark that refuses to be dulled by sleepless nights. He asks how you fared last night, and you answer honestly, because there is no point pretending among people who live the same struggle. He listens closely, then tells you something simple. He has found work sweeping at a warehouse. Nothing glamorous, nothing steady, but enough to earn a few coins without sacrificing his dignity. He explains how he approached the foreman, how he showed he could work without complaint, and how the man eventually gave him a chance. His voice carries a quiet pride, the kind that grows slowly rather than flaring brightly. You feel something shift inside you as he speaks. Not envy, not disbelief, something closer to possibility. You have become so used to surviving that the thought of stepping beyond that mode feels almost unfamiliar. But the idea lingers, threading itself through your tired thoughts. If he can manage it, perhaps you can too. He notices your expression and gives a small nod, as if confirming that the thought is worth keeping alive. Later that day, you walk the riverfront, your exhaustion softened by that new sliver of hope. The warehouses stand in neat rows, their entrances open like yawning mouths, each full of noise and movement. Men haul crates, boys run errands, foremen shout instructions over the clatter. It is overwhelming, but you find yourself drifting closer, drawn by the memory of the older man's quiet confidence. You linger near one building longer than you intend, watching workers sweep sawdust from the floor. A foreman approaches, sizing you up with a look that feels like a calculation. You brace yourself for dismissal, but instead, he asks if you can hold a broom without collapsing. His voice carries a hint of amusement, not unkind but sharply practical. You straighten your posture and say yes, perhaps with more certainty than you feel. He shrugs and points you toward a corner where a broom leans against the wall. The handle is worn smooth from countless hands. You pick it up, surprised at the weight, and begin sweeping. The work is not easy. Your arms tremble from fatigue, and your back protests every motion, but you keep going. Each stroke feels like a statement, a small insistence that you are capable of more than simply drifting from night to night. Hours pass, and when the foreman finally waves you over, you expect criticism. Instead, he hands you a coin and tells you to return tomorrow if you want more. The coin sits warm in your palm, heavier than any you have held in days, valuable not only for what it can buy, but for what it represents. You leave the warehouse feeling taller, even though your spine is aching. As evening settles over the city, you realize you are walking differently. There is purpose in your steps, a faint but persistent energy that was not there before. The shelters no longer feel like inevitable destinations. The rope rooms and coffins remain part of your world, but they do not define its limits. Something inside you has begun to turn, like a locked door shifting slightly on its hinges. You know the path ahead will not be simple. The cycle does not release people easily. But now, for the first time in far too long, you see a way forward that does not end where it began. You go to sleep that night with a cautious sense of direction, and the feeling stays with you long after the city drifts into its usual darkness. You look back on those nights and realize they shaped you in ways you never expected. What began as a desperate struggle to stay warm and upright slowly transformed into a strange education, one taught not by books or scholars but by the people who walked the same cold streets beside you. Each evening carved its own lesson into your memory. You learned how to read danger in the shift of a shadow, how to hear approaching trouble in the rhythm of distant footsteps, and how to measure a person's character by the way they spoke to someone with nothing left to lose. You remember the shelters that forced you to sleep sitting or hanging like some tired laundry forgotten on a line. Those arrangements seemed absurd at first, almost comical, yet they revealed how far people will go to find even the smallest scrap of rest. You discovered that discomfort does not break you as quickly as fear does, and that the simple ability to close your eyes without shivering can feel like a luxury. The city became a teacher that showed no mercy, yet offered clarity with every hardship. You think of the people you met, their faces softened by exhaustion yet animated by humor at the strangest moments. Even in the worst conditions, someone always managed to spark a smile, a joke whispered over a rope, a story exchanged in the cold while waiting for a spot to open. These moments taught you that companionship is not made of comfort, but of shared struggle. You began to see that survival is rarely a solitary act. Even when food was scarce and tempers worn thin, there were hands that steadied you, voices that warned you, and strangers who offered kindness without expecting anything in return. Society looked different from the ground. You saw how quickly people judged the tired, the dirty, the worn down, as though misfortune were a contagious condition. Yet you also saw the rare souls who looked past your appearance and recognized your humanity without hesitation. It changed the way you viewed everyone else. You learned that the world is divided not by wealth or poverty, but by those who choose to look away and those who choose to see. Most of all, you learned about yourself. You discovered that you could endure more than you ever imagined. Nights spent propped over ropes or curled in narrow wooden boxes revealed strengths you never knew you carried. You found patience in scarcity, resilience in exhaustion, and a surprising capacity for hope in moments when hope seemed laughable. The hardships that should have hardened you instead sharpened your understanding. You began to recognize the quiet determination that kept you moving, even on the nights when your body threatened to give out entirely. And now, standing with distance between you and those cold streets, you understand the weight of what you lived through. It taught you that survival is not only about finding shelter or warmth, but about refusing to vanish inside your own suffering. It taught you that dignity persists even in the roughest corners of the world. It taught you that people can be cruel, indifferent, generous, or brave, often all within the same hour. The city did not break you. It revealed you, and the lessons you carry now are woven from every night you endured, every kindness you received, and every moment you pushed forward when the darkness felt endless.